everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration, the final one of 2022. This all started with Future State back in January of 2021, and it's hard to believe it's going to be like 2 years since we started doing this DC Spotlight. Time flies, and glad that Future State is further and further in the rear view.
It's not the future anymore.
Yeah, but just like during Future State when there was tons of books, man, there's tons of books. Like, it's a light week for everybody else. It was a light week last week for Marvel and most of the independents. This week's even less output from Marvel and independents. But man, DC's like, we got to get this stuff out for the 2022 calendar year. I guess there's like, I don't even know how many books, like 18 it felt like. And we didn't even necessarily read all of them. There's a few things, the Young Justice Deep Targets or whatever it's called, Hard Target, whatever, that we don't typically talk about, and some other books. But for the most part, we read everything. We're going to talk about it. But the other thing is, even though we read these, there's a couple like huge anthologies. So yeah, it made for a very heavy week. So I guess if you're off of work, if you're out of school and you need some reading material, this is the week for you for DC. I feel like overall it was pretty solid. I'd say above average, but it wasn't one of those weeks where, we had books that just blew me away. So anyway, what were your thoughts, Rocky?
Well, there was a lot of significant books, I thought. I think that, interestingly enough, there's a lot of storylines that ended, that comic books that hit us sort of out of the blue that actually have some kind of significant revelations in it. John Stewart Emerald Knight has a very significant revelation at the end of it, which was surprising because that sort of came out of the blue. And I think Historia, is completely underrated, is not given enough hype. We got Action Comics 1050 starting off a new era for Superman, and Dead Boy Detectives, and there's just a whole slew here that I think are sort of coming under the radar, and some are over the radar, that makes for a very interesting way to sort of capstone this year. And I think it's almost emblematic of the schizophrenic nature of DC Comics over the last year, where you and I can both we've both had some significant highs and some significant lows for DC, and so it's been sort of an interesting year. So at some point we might want to do a retrospective on DC, because it was an interesting year and an interesting week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what's funny is, again, apologize that this is coming out a little later than normal, but just with the holidays and travel and all that, it just couldn't be helped. And last week's was late, and that was 100% my fault because I read all these books last week. So I had like refreshed my memory and kind of skimmed through them. But let's go ahead and get started. First book we're going to talk about is another of the Sandman universe books. It's Dead Boy Detectives #1. It's from writer Pornsak Pichachot. Jeff Stokely is the artist. Miguel Muerto does the colors. Hassan Atsman Elhau on lettering. We see the witch that we saw in the Nightmare Country. Thessaly is her name. We saw her in Tynan's Nightmare Country book title recently, and so I suppose you could think of that issue as sort of a backdoor pilot to this. Now, the Dead Boy Detectives aren't new characters. That being said, I've never read anything of the Dead Boy Detectives. I enjoyed this well enough. I think part of the reason that I enjoyed this so much is I just I'm a fan of Pornsak. I really enjoy his style of writing. I like the vocabulary and kind of the language and the tone that he uses. So even though this is in the Sandman universe, and so, kind of by definition, it's going to be kind of darker, a little more on the horror side of things from DC. He keeps it light. He keeps this interesting balance. There's also enough intrigue with what's going on with these Dead Boy Detectives, which they are dead, but there are certain members who are living of the human race who can see them, but they're exactly as the title said. They're young boys. They were killed when they were young. They're very much inquisitive by nature. They like to solve mysteries. So you can almost think of it like, I don't know, the Hardy Boys, in the Sandman, realm, the Sandman world, Sandman universe, if you want to use that term, as the title says. So again, I'm not that familiar with these characters, but I thought it was interesting enough. And Pornsack's leaning into some of his Asian roots, I suppose, because we're going to get what looks to be some ghosts and some mythologies from some Asian countries, if you will. So, in fact, one of the main characters here who shows up, and unfortunately doesn't survive the issue, is talking about the way that Thai people see ghosts, Taiwanese from Thailand. And so I found that interesting. I don't know much about that. I don't know how much Thai ancestry Pornsack has. I know that he has some Japanese ancestry, but it's nice to see other mythologies brought in here. So I thought it was solid. I thought the art by Jeff Stokely very much suited the tone that Pornsack was going for. So overall, I thought this was pretty solid, a good start, and new reader friendly as well. Because again, I'm not familiar with Dead Boy Detectives, and I was able to pick it up, and I didn't feel lost at all. What were your thoughts?
I agree with you. It adds to the mythology of the Dead Boys, and I've read a little bit of the Dead Boys. I've got their last series. I did read Thessaly. That's not the full name of the series. It was a 4-issue series on Thessaly, so I'm sort of familiar with it. I like how it builds in the mythology here, and I like how it actually expands the idea that it's not just these two Dead Boy detectives. And their backstory is that they're, whatever, I think it was like 100 years ago, they died together and they end up coming back, and they're literally detectives. They're like the Hardy Boys meets Sherlock Holmes meets the supernatural. But they as you said, Pornsack here does a good chat. Did I say that right? Pornsack? Pornsack. Sorry.
Pornsack Pizza Choke. I love saying his last name. Pornsack.
So yeah, imagine going through life with that name. That's a horror show right there. But but no, it's all good. He does a good job here. Like I say, new reader friendly, and the idea that incorporating these are different ghosts. There's actually, it's almost like a miniature group of detectives. They have their own little it reminds me a little bit of just a small little just a teenage gang that they happen to all be dead, ghosts in their own right from different mythologies, from different countries, different cultures, and they're going to have to solve a murder mystery of the supernatural. And I think the characters are well-rounded, or work kind of well. It took me a little while to get used to the art, to be honest. I thought it was off. I wasn't prepared for some reason. This is a jarring artistic change for me from what I'm used to seeing how these characters drawn. I can't remember the previous artists that had drawn them, but by the time I finished reading this story, I was on board, and I'm definitely going to be on board for this moving forward. So people who like the supernatural, if you like Sandman, if you like good mysteries, this is it. And it was a pleasant surprise. I mean, Sandman is always a pleasant surprise. It's rare that I read a bad Sandman anything, quite frankly. Anything related to the Sandman Presents with DC, they always seem to do a pretty damn good job. So, kudos to Pornsack, and apologies for laughing at the name.
Yeah, I feel like any writer that gets the call to be on a Sandman universe book is like, oh my God, Neil Gaiman. Everybody respects him, looks up to him, and so everybody's bringing their A game when they get on a Sandman book. So, all right, Batman Beyond the White Knight #7 is up next. Sean Murphy on script, art, cover, and the 1/25 variant cover. Dave Stewart handles the colors and world design on letters. I think this is the penultimate issue. I think there's just one left after this. And I thought it was pretty solid. We get sort of a reconciliation of Bruce and Dick Grayson in the Murphyverse, which I enjoyed. We get a lot of Terry McGinnis fighting against Powers as best he can, because remember, he's wearing a Batman Beyond suit that Powers has managed to compromise, I guess you could say. It's Bruce Wayne tech, but the Powers Corporation has made their own modifications, and so he's sort of set against the Bat family for a little while, but they do manage to purge what Powers technology or software or infiltration virus, whatever you want to call it, is in the suit. But the way they do that is by injecting Jack Napier, in the Joker, formerly the Joker, into the Batman Beyond suit. So I wasn't quite clear. I mean, we know that Bruce for the last few issues has been able to see and hear Jack Napier. Only Bruce, because supposedly he's dead. So this is sort of, I don't know, like a digital recording of Napier, I guess is how I'm kind of taking it. That's somehow in Bruce's brain. But yet they hook him up to one of the Bat vehicles. So I'm not quite sure how it was downloaded from Bruce's brain into Terry's, whatever. But I mean, it works. And what's interesting is because the Batman Beyond suit has this holographic projector, once Jack is in the Batman Beyond suit, and so Bruce is like, I no longer have to listen to him. Now Terry's stuck with him. But he can project a hologram of Jack Napier. And so everybody gets to see Jack, which is kind of interesting. And as much as I don't like the Joker, and in the Sean Gordon Murphy verse, he certainly has turned, because it's not the Joker anymore, right? It's Jack Napier, and he's much more of a, I guess, I don't want to say heroic character, but more of a protagonist rather than antagonist, and certainly trying to redeem himself. And in the original Batman White Knight, the Joker was more of an affliction, the way that Murphy portrayed it, more of an affliction rather than anything that was chosen, almost like a sickness. And I do like that take. And what I'm saying is this doesn't feel like the Joker to me, so it's not annoying like the way the Joker is to me, where I'm like, oh my God, I've read enough Joker stories. But one thing that is sort of the same, but in a kind of funhouse mirror distortion, you hear so many people say in the regular DC universe that Batman and the Joker are kind of, opposite sides of the same coin in a way, that because they're both so obsessive, and obviously they're opposing forces. In this way, because this Batman has made some questionable decisions, obviously he ended up in prison. He's not necessarily the most heroic version of Batman that we've seen. And with this version of Joker being, more toward that, like I was saying, more of an antagonist or more of a protagonist rather than an antagonist, you could say that these two characters are also two sides of the same coin, even though they're different. You wouldn't say that this Batman is that much like the regular Bruce Wayne and vice versa. So for the Joker, so having Jack Napier as part of the Bat family, which is basically what's happening here, is pretty interesting to me. There is the whole cliche, of taking a villain, especially a popular one, and making him into a hero. And I certainly get tired of that. But this feels, you can't put it in that simple of terms for these characters. Because like I said, there's less heroism to this version of Bruce Wayne, but there's also less villainy to this version of the Joker. So everybody sort of lives more toward the gray area. So we'll see how that all plays out. There was also a great scene with Bruce and Harley Quinn. We know they're married here, which I still think is weird. But obviously Jack's dead. Jack seems to have accepted it, and it was, I don't know. I guess you could label it as a marriage of convenience. Again, you need to go back and read those other previous volumes of White Knight to get the full understanding. But it's almost like Bruce has seen it as a marriage of convenience and not really acknowledged it as a real marriage, and not really wanted to acknowledge the fact that he does truly have feelings for Harley Quinn. And that seems like it's starting to change with this issue, which I also enjoyed. So jam-packed issue, lots going on, tons of action. And this might be my favorite White Knight series so far. I'd probably have to go back and reread all of them to say that with 100%. But I mean, they just keep getting better and better. I mean, the Harley Quinn one, I was like, oh, that's my favorite. And then he comes out with White Knight, and I'm like, oh, now that's even better. So kudos to Sean Gordon Murphy. He's really firing on all cylinders. And, glad DC's seemingly is hands off, and Sean's getting to do whatever he wants to do, because these changes, like with Jason Todd being the first Robin, for example, the changes he's making, even if they're inadvertent like that change, they're really working. They really make it feel different and unique. So what were your thoughts on this, Rocky?
This feels like it has a happy ending, and this isn't even the ending. There's one issue to go. And this actually feels like an ending to me. I mean, it was even an inside joke in the comic where on the final page of this, it looks like they're walking toward the screen like in an action movie with an explosion behind them, except minus the explosion. And I like the fact that this feels like we're heading toward a happy ending here, and it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel. This doesn't feel Duke Ex Machina. It's Sean Gordon Murphy's done a really good job here of the plotting in this story. The plotting in this series has been excellent. I've enjoyed it. It actually was believable to me. I thought it contained a good emotional moments for all the characters, to Harley, to Batman Beyond, to Bruce Wayne, even Joker, and even the offshoot series with Jason Todd and the new character Gam or whatever her name is there. Nightwing and Barbara Gordon. In fact, you could even put Sean Gordon Murphy's Nightwing and Barbara Gordon against Tom Taylor's Babs and Dick Grayson any day of the week, because there's a great scene here between Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon. And in fact, well, I don't want to spoil issue 100 of Nightwing. Suffice to say that people might be looking back to this issue if they want to get some Dix and Babs love. But in any event, I digress. Suffice to say, this has been a good series. This is I like where this is going here. I love Harley. This is my favorite version of Harley, because this is a Harley that is kick-ass. And you could tell there's a little bit of insanity in her that she reels in just enough, and Bruce Wayne is screwed up and flawed enough, just enough to maintain some degree of he's a far more interesting Bruce Wayne because he's more flawed. And sometimes when you're flawed, sometimes you make a mistake, you're always paying the price. And this is about a Bruce Wayne that has paid a price. All the characters here, they've grown, they've evolved, and like you said, this is like the fourth, I think, Sean Gordon Murphy series, and it only keeps getting better and better. There's something to be said about a Murphyverse, or when a writer gets their own universe and you don't let other people mess with it and you leave it just for that writer. Maybe that's something that DC should work on, because I don't want anyone else other than Murphy to be writing anything in his Murphyverse here. Or if he's gonna go with anybody else, maybe let him handpick the person. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that point, you mentioned I guess it was a 2-issue series, right? With Jason Todd, Red Robin, and Gann. That was somebody else, right? So keep in mind that Sean Gordon Murphy, he started his career as an artist, and I think when they agreed to give him White Knight and let him write and draw it, he brought on somebody to script. And if you're not familiar with that term, it means Sean was plotting and he was laying out the story, and he's saying, in this panel this is what happens, in this panel this is what happens. But he had a more experienced writer who was actually writing the dialogue, just to make sure, or helping him with the dialogue, just to make sure everything flowed, somebody with a little more experience. So now I don't think Sean needs that anymore, because he's got his feet under him, as Rocky said. Yeah, this is the fourth one. But yeah, that other person obviously was breaking story and breaking panels and whatnot with Sean, and Sean trusted him enough to give him that 2-issue Red Robin and Gann series. And if I wouldn't have known better, I would have thought that Sean wrote it. I mean, it had the same tone, and it fit perfectly. So, yeah, I say that to say, generally, I agree with you. I hope that they leave this just for Sean Gordon Murphy, which it seems like DC's headed that way, right? Like with Deceased, Tom Taylor's the only one that's done any of that. We've had DC versus Vampires. It's a pretty small group, Tynion and Rosenberg, and then I think when Tynion left, Alex Packnadel came on. So yeah, it's good to keep it small, I think.
Yeah, Dark Knights of Steel with Taylor as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So all right, let's move on. Next book we're going to talk about Batman Gotham Knights Gilded City Part 3, which is a tie-in to the video game. Evan Narcisse is the writer, Abel is the artist, John does the colors, a bunch of these one name artists. Steve Wan's on letters. I don't play the video game. I have no idea how well this ties in or not. It is telling a story in 2 different timelines, back in the 1880s of Gotham City, or 1840s, I should say, 1847 it says, with the Court of Owls, and then also in present day. I got to say that I'm vastly more invested in the old school 1847 storyline. That being said, it does suffer from something I've complained about in Detective Comics, certainly in that annual, where it's like, man, so Bruce wasn't really the first Batman. We're getting all these, precursors to Batman. And I get it. It's fun to go back and tell a story of a version of Batman in the Old West, as it were. But it does, as I've said when I talked about the Detective Annual, it does kind of lessen the speciality of Batman. Why didn't Bruce become Batman? Because these other characters that were inspired by bats fighting back in the day made it seem like when that bat came through the window, it was like, oh, Eureka. And obviously we know, because all this stuff is retcon. So we do find out who the big bad is in this issue. And it makes me wonder if he's the big bad in the video game as well. I would assume so. When you're talking about a villain who can, span that nearly 200-year timeline from Gotham City in 1847 to Gotham City in present day, hey, it's Vandal Savage. So not a bad choice for a villain, I suppose. But again, the current storyline is just kind of meh for me. So what do you think?
Well, I thought finally the writer Yvonne Narcisse finally revealed some information here, because I sort of threw out the comment, I think, earlier, that what's the name of the Batman of 1847? Who is he? What's his name? And I guessed because on one of the covers of the second issue, it says there's a wanted poster that says Runaway on it. And it's confirmed in this issue that, yeah, his name is Runaway. So this Batman character, it's actually not Batman, but it's a character that certainly looks like an 1847 version of Batman, but it's called Runaway, and it's established in this issue that this Runaway character, last issue, this Runaway character helped a number of other people overcome like a zombie attack, and it's revealed in this issue that the Court of Owls, which is in its infancy in 1847, is trying to resurrect the dead and commune and resurrect the dead in 1847 Gotham, and this Runaway, of course, wants to prevent them from doing that, but they're fascinated by the Runaway, and they want to recruit the Runaway into their cause, which is kudos to the writer, to Narcisse, because that's something that you'd expect the Court of Owls to do. They're always looking for more talents to add to their mix. They're looking for the best of the best to work for them and to be indoctrinated into their way of thinking. But of course, this Runaway, interestingly enough, this Runaway is revealed to be, in fact, a runaway slave. It was a former slave and there's a farther flashback to 1834, 1835, where this runaway, this slave escaped, and so his history is interesting there. So it's actually whetting the appetite a little bit. I'm actually into this story, where I don't know if this is a criticism or if this is going to be an underhanded compliment. I still don't quite understand how this past story about the Court of Owls and the Vandal Savage in the past, where they're resurrecting the dead and the Court of Owls, and there's this FOMO virus, a fear of missing out virus in the future. There was a virus in 1847 Gotham, an epidemic, and it's somehow linked to Vandal Savage, and somehow that's linked to a FOMO virus in the present day. The connections aren't really there. Now, the fact that Vandal Savage is revealed at the end to be probably the guy behind the scenes, that doesn't really answer my question. But at the same time, I'm definitely more curious now, because that Vandal Savage is, the great thing about Vandal Savage as a villain is that he's always playing the long game. And you know that, and so now the wheels are ticking in my head. Oh, it's Vandal Savage. He's got the patience of Job. I mean, Vandal Savage can wait centuries to pull the wool out from someone else. So if he's playing the long game, this might be actually fairly interesting. And I don't play the video games, but I'm enjoying the story.
Yeah, I feel like the way that it might tie in, the only thing I can think of is whatever the kind of snake oil, stuff that they were selling to people that eventually kills them, and then they kind of rise up like zombies, for lack of a better term. Maybe somehow that was changed or adjusted, or whatever. It's the precursor of this FOMO virus.
Yeah, you might be right. They say the FOMO virus takes people's self-preservation instinct away. So zombies, of course, don't have a self-preservation instinct. So maybe that's, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grasping, but that's the only thing I can think. So, all right, up next, Blue Beetle Graduation Day #2 from writer Josh Trujillo. Adrian Gutierrez is the artist, Will Quintana on colors, Louis Gattoni on letters. I encourage everybody to go back and listen to the episode, the interview I did with Josh, and we talked not too spoilery about this particular issue. We're going to spoil a lot more. We certainly discussed in that interview the fact that we have a new character showing up here. So speculator alert for those that like to get first appearances. We have the first appearance of Victoria Cord. who is Tim Cord's hereto for unmentioned sibling, whatever. Like it's never been revealed that he had a sister before, probably because he actually didn't. She's been created for this series. And again, go listen to Josh and I talk about her. Josh gives his opinions on who she is and how she compares to Ted, what some of the similarities and differences are between the two. So that's sort of the big reveal in this issue. But we also get to see the villain. I hate to almost call her a villain, but I guess we could call her the antagonist, who shows up here, Dynastis, and we see her without her armor. She has an armor that's very similar to Blue Beetle's. Obviously, it's yellow instead of blue, yellow and black instead of blue and black. But she seems to have a lot in common with Jaime. So the question is, why is she attacking him, right? And with the help of Ted Kord, she is subdued, and she takes the armor off, sheds the armor, and we find out her name is Xiomara. She's from Brazil, and beyond that, yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see what exactly is going on. And again, I can't encourage you guys enough to go listen to my interview with Josh, because we go over a lot of what's going on in terms of the story. But it is a final page reveal here of Starfire showing up. We know Jaime's kind of been put on the sidelines by the rest of the Justice League, with the Reach supposedly on their way, and Jaime's feeling kind of left out. His parents haven't sent him over to Palmera City to work at his aunt's diner. He's not supposed to be being in costume. So he's feeling pretty down. And for Starfire to show up and say the planet's preparing for war, Jaime, you're the only one who can stop it. Well, it sounds like he's not going to be sidelined as Blue Beetle much longer. And from what Josh told me, Starfire is going to be a bit of a mentor for Jaime going forward. So curious to see how that all plays out. Last thing I'll mention is the Adrian Gutierrez art. Very bright, very colorful. I mean, the brightness would be the colors by Lucas Catoni, or Will Katana, rather. But Adrian Gutierrez on the art does a fantastic job. Very dynamic, bit of a more youthful style, almost cartoonish at times, but it really works for the tone of the story that they're telling here. So I thought this was solid. What'd you think?
Yeah, this felt very action-packed. It felt like it was always active. And the colors, you're right, the colors are fantastic. Really great on the colors. I liked the art. I thought the colors just popped off the page. This was kinetic. This felt like a fast read to me, despite it had a good amount of dialogue, but I love Ted Kord. I love Victoria Kord. What a debut. She looks like quite the, I thought she looks actually kind of, oddly enough, an attractive, corporate-esque kind of woman there. I love her Blue Beetle brooch that she has on her stylish sort of, she's got a great fashion sense here, just beautifully drawn. This character, Xiomara, I'm really curious to see Xiomara exactly. She has her own Beetle. I'm not super knowledgeable when it comes to Blue Beetle, so I'm a little bit, with this Reach about to invade the planet. I don't know if I agree with the Justice League. I thought that was sort of a foolish, almost a dumbfounded move to take Jamie Reese off the table. By he's got a connection to the Reach. Why would you take him off the table and tell him to go back to work at his mom's diner? What the hell is that about? Like, that was just, that to me, that was a plot point that didn't quite make a lot of sense to me. I'm very happy to see that Starfire shows up at the end of the issue to basically, hopefully, as you sort of give a little bit of a spoiler alert, Starfire will be somewhat of a mentor. And I think, Starfire does have that she is an alien. She's familiar with the most of the alien races in the galaxy. She's got a very eclectic background herself. She's an interesting choice for Jamie Reese as a mentor, and actually I think is an inspired one, quite frankly. I really like that idea. Makes it more interesting. Plus, Starfire is hot. She's beautifully drawn here. Definitely is a different style. Artistically, this is a very more of a stylistic interpretation of Starfire, but the hair looks crazy as well. But it's fun. This caught me by surprise, this issue. I wasn't expecting I wasn't expecting to enjoy it. And I don't say that in a bad way. There were so many comic books just saying, I thought I was going to end up skim reading this, and I didn't. I took my time. I wanted to take my time. I slowed down. I enjoyed it, and I encourage people to pick this up. This was a really nice. I think I'm gonna graduate reading Blue Beetle.
Yeah, I mean, Jaime is an interesting character. I'm kind of the same way, like as you, in terms of not being that familiar. I didn't read any Jaime Reyes until the New 52, and then I think I read the first 11, 12 issues, and I honestly don't really remember anything other than he was going to high school, he was living with his family, so it wasn't super memorable.
I'm going to ask you a question if I can on this, because
Yep.
the only thing that I had mixed feelings about, and this is probably shows my bias, but I felt taken out of the story a little bit with all the Spanish. I should mention that for people who are watching, we get preview copies, and we got both an English version copy and a Spanish version copy of this comic. But I'm wondering why there's at least one full page here. There's pages where all the dialogue's in Spanish. And I'm wondering, what is the point of doing, like, it just seemed odd to me that there's whole conversations that take place in the Spanish language. I don't speak Spanish. I got no idea what they're saying.
Yeah, so Josh actually talked. Yeah, Josh talked about that when we.
I think that's. I'm asking you. Do you think I'm wrong on that, or why did you make that choice?
Josh talked about that, and it's a conscious choice. And when I first was reading the first issue, the English version, and I noticed that, and I'm of Hispanic heritage, so I'm half Hispanic, but I don't speak nor read any Spanish. And I wish I did. My grandparents, when they didn't want us kids to know what they were talking about, they would speak to each other in Spanish. And my mom, who's the one that's, that's her ancestry. When she was little, she could speak Spanish and understand Spanish because her grandmother only spoke Spanish. But then over the years, she kind of lost the ability to speak it. She can still kind of understand it. But I say all that to say, in kind of the Hispanic culture, and Josh talks about this in the interview, switching back and forth from Spanish to English for those bilingual people is just, they don't even think about it, right? It's just second nature. So I kind of I mean, I get what you're saying, and I understand, because it's like, man, when I read something, I want to read it all. I want to understand it all. In context, you can certainly understand what they're saying, what, kind of the general gist of what they're saying. They're not putting anything in Spanish that's like crucial to the story that you don't understand. So it's more to give a feel of accurate depiction of Hispanic culture in this country, Mexican Americans specifically. That's Jaime's ancestry. So that's kind of and how they switch back and forth. So that's where it comes from. And again, Josh talks about it in the interview if you're curious. But I do see your point, right? Like, it's like, man, do I need to go and like type this phrase into Google Translate so I can understand exactly what they're saying? Everybody, you don't need to really, I don't want to say waste your time, but you don't need to take the time to go and do that, because you can see by the body language and by the context of what's happening in the story, you can kind of understand what's going on without necessarily translating it. But you can if you want. But I hope, that being said, I hope it doesn't turn people off. I could see that happening. People going, I bought the English version. Why am I getting Spanish? Like, man, if you grew up where I grew up, in California, Central California, or if you live in Southern California or Arizona where I live now, or Texas or whatever, it's like, man, you hear Spanish, constantly. That's just the, the world that we live in. So that's the point of it, just to try to depict a more, realistic.
I'm just really interesting. I never looked at the Spanish version of preview that we have, but I'm curious to look at it, because does it flip the Spanish and English dialogue, or does it all in Spanish? Like, I'd be curious. Like, I just don't understand if doing it half and half and then having two versions of it. It just seems odd to me. But
yeah, I would guess that the Spanish version is all in Spanish, because I know they're selling that south of the border, as it were. So anyway, all right. Up next, we have DC Horror presents Sergeant Rock versus the Army of the Dead #4 from writer Bruce Campbell. Eduardo Risso is the artist. Christian Rossi on colors. Rob Lee on letters. Bit of a transitional issue here. We have Sergeant Rock and the rest of Easy Company trying to infiltrate behind German lines. They're trying to follow the doctor that's created these quote unquote zombies, even though the term zombies didn't come around until the 70s. Hitler, we know, was very interested in the supernatural and was looking for ways to use the occult to help his war effort. This story by Bruce Campbell is sort of an extension of that, with Easy Company and Sergeant Rock and trying to stop him, basically. So a lot of action here, as I said, as Easy Company follows this doctor and is trying to find out where Hitler is, what the end game is, and stop these zombies from being created. So there's not much more to it than that. It moves along pretty quick, a relatively quick read. If you're a fan of Eduardo Risso's art, you'll be really, really happy because his art really shines. Great visual storytelling in this one. Fabulous main cover by Gary Frank. And there's also a really cool propaganda type cover from Francesco Francavilla that I thought was cool too. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. There's not a lot of, isn't it odd? This is a war comic where there's a lot of violence and everything else, and yet I'm inclined to say this story doesn't have a lot of substance. And yet I don't say that. I don't say that in a derogatory way. This is just. I love Edward Rizzo's art. I think he was. I think the guy was born to draw an army comic, a war comic, and I'm glad that we're getting this one. I mean, we got zombies, and we got Adolf Hitler, and we got Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, and this. I enjoyed this. It's funny. I probably took as long to read this, despite the fact that it's mostly just pictures, and the dialogue goes. Most of it is it's captioned. Like there's a lot of there's just like expository boxes as opposed to dialogue per se. It's just fun. This is just straight up good pure violence. This is one great thing that writer Bruce Campbell understands about classic Sergeant Rock stories is that there was always some smart ass comment when they're in the midst of war, because one of the things that kept Sergeant Rock and Easy Company from going insane is that they could find humor, even bad humor, in the most horrific types of situations. Bruce Campbell does that to really good effect here, and there's a lot of humor here, and I mean it's embodied on the very last page. Even when Sergeant Rock says we got good news and bad news. What's the good news? Well, we just found Hitler. What's the bad news? I lost my Zippo. He'd used the Zippo earlier to facilitate an explosion, but in any event, it's just it's that type of hard, visceral, horror-like elements that make this work. It's a combination. I would not have thought. I mean, kudos to Bruce Campbell for. I mean, the guy may not be. I'm thinking of the movie star Berserker, Keanu Reeves. Yeah, he's probably not he's no Keanu Reeves, but I like where he's a decent enough comic book writer that he's clearly he has enough fun with this, and I'm enjoying it. I'm getting every issue of this series, and you know what I love Francavilla's art. I'm getting all his covers. I'm not actually getting any of the covers of which surprises me. I probably should get both covers, but I'm just getting the Francavilla covers for this one because they all look like war posters and they just look amazing.
Yeah, they really are cool looking propaganda posters. And Eduardo Risso, if he reminds me of anybody, it's Francavilla in terms of his style. So, all right, up next we have Wonder Woman Historia, The Amazons. This is book number 3 from writer Kelly Sue DeConnick. Nicola Scott is the artist, Annette Kwok on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. Man, I wish this book came out quicker. I just wish there wasn't so much time between issues. When you look at the art, you can understand why. But I don't know. I just feel like it sort of loses some momentum. I've almost forgotten what's happened in the previous issues by the time the next one comes out. So anyway, what were your thoughts, Rocky?
I apologize for the delay. I'm just waiting for it to pop up here. I thought this was a nice capstone on this 3-issue series. I know that Kelly Sue DeConnick has stated that she actually has 9 chapters that she'd like to write. And when she originally gave an interview back when the first volume of Historia came out, and this is the 3rd one, but when the first issue came out, she had talked that she was seeking permission, or was hoping that it would be well received enough that she could tell all 9 chapters of the story she has, but she was approved for 3. Now, I don't know if we're going to get the other 6 chapters, but I personally hope that we do. I quite enjoy this. Now, I'm happy to report that, the art by Nicola Scott is absolutely beautiful. That's one thing that this series has. It's been gifted with not only a good writer with Kelly Sue DeConnick, who does a very good job delving into the mythology and adding to it and giving her own interpretation of it, but between it was Gene Ha did the second issue. Phil Jimenez did the first one, and now here with Nicola Scott. This is truly fantastic. The art here really is amazing. This particular issue shines, and one of the characters that really shines is Hera herself. Now, I could easily spend probably a good hour. At some point, I might even do a retrospective, and maybe we'll do it together. I don't know if we ever find the time to really delve into what all the meanings and the metaphors and the mythologies behind this 3-volume story. But this really puts the capstone on the origins of how the Amazons came to be, and it's sort of. What I really like about it is these Amazons were essentially created by Hera, working her machinations with the other goddesses as sort of a way to as a pushback against all the male gods, Zeus and his chauvinism and the male gods. But Hera herself sort of worked behind the scenes, and it was these other gods that ultimately, the god Hestia, Artemis, Demeter, Hecate, Aphrodite, and Athena were the ones that were really the 6. They each formed their house, and there were 6 houses of Amazons. And Hippolyta, the first Amazon, formed the 7th house of the Amazons. And unfortunately, what happened is one of the Amazons, out of anger, out of revenge against one of the followers of the god Apollo, killed one of Apollo's worshippers at the altar of Apollo last issue, and Apollo found out, and ultimately Apollo tells Zeus, and Zeus they want to now wipe out the Amazons. And in this issue, Zeus is angry, and he's angry at Hera. He's, now the existence of these Amazons, they're aware of them, and he sends Hephaestus, his son. I just call him Heracles. Sorry, he sends Heracles, his son, to wipe out the Amazons, and of course that doesn't go according to plan. This is a very different story than the one you're used to. Most people, when they think of Wonder Woman, you're going to think of the George Perez version of Wonder Woman, because that's probably the most, in the modern age, that's the one that's the most predominant on people's minds. And in that one, Heracles rapes Hippolyta, subjugates the Amazons, and ultimately the Amazons rise up, etc., etc. This story is very different. This has a different outcome. Heracles doesn't get Hippolyta's girdle here. Heracles is soundly defeated by the combination of all the goddesses that make up the patron goddesses of the Amazons, and the Amazons hold their own against the gods, and it was through the machinations of Hera that the Amazons are not wiped out. And the art here is just incredible. The battle sequence against Heracles, how the Amazons defeat him, the combination of the violence and also the idea of the peaceful warrior. Even Hippolyta, after defeating Heracles, they actually they dismembered him. They absolutely obliterated Heracles, but they actually did so out of a sign of respect, because they're dealing with a god himself, and they felt, well, holding back against the god, you don't insult the gods. And so Zeus himself wants to wipe out the Amazons, but the way Hera herself uses the vanity of the male gods against them, and the way that they manipulate, they send the one god Dionysus, who is sort of like the god of drama, and he loves actors, and Dionysus loves the Amazons, and he loves the way that they're good at theater. And Hera has Dionysus lie to Apollo, use Apollo's ego against them, and Apollo wants to wipe out the Amazons, and Dionysus says, well, I'm sure you want to wipe out the Amazons because they want to die. They want to die. They want to die in glory. You don't want to deprive them of that, do you? And of course, Apollo does. So Apollo doesn't want to kill them. So that's their. It's like using reverse psychology. Tell Apollo the Amazons want to die for glory, and then Apollo, through Zeus, will deny them the right to die. And so ultimately Zeus punishes the Amazons by caging them on Paradise Island, where they can never leave and they can never infect the rest of humanity. And so now that's their cage. Zeus resurrects all the Amazons as punishment, resurrects them, even the ones that were killed, and traps them on Themyscira, traps them on Paradise Island, where they can never leave. And ultimately this ends with the birth of Diana. And we know that Diana will be the first Amazon to actually leave Paradise, but that is a story for another day. And that's really the Cold Notes version. There's so much more I could talk about, but I loved the themes here. I loved the art. I loved the mythology. I thoroughly enjoyed Kelly Sue DeConnick's new way of looking. It's like she looked at the Amazons and their history through a different set of glasses. It was beautiful. She looked at it through a different lens, and she gave her own interpretation on it. And it actually, in my view, it propped up the Amazons. It made me feel more respect for the Amazons, for the mythology. It possessed a degree of verisimilitude that I think the original origin lacked, quite frankly. I think it propped up and it exemplified the arrogance of Zeus himself, and not in a man versus woman way, but just in terms of the arrogance. Just Hera herself is quite devious here too, in the way she manipulates Zeus, and the way that Apollo is manipulated, and the way that Hera plays the gods against each other, and the way even Hippolyta uses the gods and puts forth her case to Zeus to preserve the Amazons and to save them and not to wipe them out. And the manner in which it ends, even symbolically at the end, when young Diana is born of clay, and there's a coin at the end, the coin representing I think the link to man's world, coin being the currency of mankind, of men, and symbolizing that Diana will be the currency, will be the manner in which the Amazons one day will reconnect with man's world. I thought it worked very well. Artemis writing the name of Diana in the sand at the end. Beautiful. This thing was poetic. This was beautiful. I can't wait to buy the hardcover for this. I think as a hardcover, this would be, all 3 volumes are beautiful, but man, this is extremely impressive. This is what I want. This is how good Wonder Woman could be if you take the time to really put your heart and soul into it, like Kelly Sue DeConnick has. And I can't sing its praises enough. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. They've all been really good. The art in every single volume has been exceptional. I love that we're getting to see different artists give us some of their best work. It is all in service of telling the same story somewhat. And I say somewhat because each of the volumes has had its own sort of distinct feel. And it's hard to sort of pinpoint or put my finger on what the feel of this one is. I mean, this one, to me, it felt like it had more. I mean, it's almost a war between the Amazonians and the gods. So it's sort of different. I think the first 2 volumes, the action was more political. You know what I'm saying? This one, it's more like they're actually fighting. It's actual action. Not to say one is better than the other, but this felt a little closer to kind of what we've seen before in Wonder Woman comics. When we talk about the Amazonians going up against the gods and that sort of thing. So I find that to be kind of interesting in a way. And as much as it's hard to say, this artist is better than that artist or whatever. I'm not going to say that. I will say personally, this is my favorite art. Nicholas Scott's art style is just the art style that I enjoy the most of the 3 art styles that we've had so far. I mean, that's not to put down the other 2 guys at all, but especially when you start talking about Nicola's run for DC Rebirth with Greg Rucka, I really, really enjoyed that as well. So this was just something I knew when Nicola was announced that she was going to be on this book that I was going to love it. And yeah, and that was 100% the case. Um, and I don't really have much more to add than what you said. Like in terms of this version of the origin of the Amazons, yeah, I mean we could talk about this book for hours, but that's been the case with every one of these volumes, with every one of these issues so far. Like they've been so dense, and it's clear that Kelly Sue is hugely invested in the story that's being told here. So, yeah, it's hard. I don't know that you could overstate how fantastic these books have been. Um, and I will also say that we don't know 100% whether or not we're going to get more of this. I mean, it was only announced for 3 volumes. Obviously, I personally hope that we get more. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's no way to know for sure whether that's going to be the case or not. Because I will say, even though this is a satisfying ending, it does feel like it's certainly a story that could continue.
Yes,
You know what I
and the
mean?
thing is, unfortunately, it's such a huge deviation from uh, the current Wonder Woman mythology in the Wonder Woman mainstream DC universe. I'm not even sure. I stand to be corrected on this. I don't believe I saw. I would like to see Wonder Woman Historia have its own Earth in the DC multiverse. I'm sure it has. We have an infinite number of Earths, but I very much would prefer to have a series of Wonder Woman stories set on this Earth, whatever the Wonder Woman Historia Earth is. I want more stories based in this universe, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think the only problem is how long it would take those issues to come out. Because again, and yeah, I mean, you can see. I mean, it's oversized art, which the black label format, which you need you need with this art to let it really shine. But there's so many. I mean, we're talking Amazonians and gods at war. So many characters, and yeah, nobody's phoning it in. This art is just fantastic. So, all right, up next we have the end. I'll put that in quotes of DC versus Vampires with issue number 12, written by James Tynion and Matthew Rosenberg. Art and colors by Otto Schmidt, Francesco Moratorino. I should have looked at these ahead of time. I'm not familiar with these last 2 artists. Luigi Casolino, letter by Tom Napolitano. Um, man, where do I start here? We get in. I'm reluctant to even call it an ending. We we get the end of this volume. That's how I'll put it. We get a resolution of Nightwing as the king of vampires. Not the resolution I was expecting, and I think it's very telling that the title of this issue is called Dawn, which a lot of people, they're going to associate the word dawn as a beginning, right? Like the dawn of the day, whatever. When it comes to vampires, maybe you think of dawn as an ending, right? Oh, sun's coming up, vampires are over, the heroes saved the day, and they won, and Supergirl managed to get to Australia, and even though things didn't quite work out the way they thought with Captain Cold, and his cold gun, blows up and he dies, but he does manage to allow Kara to charge up, and so yeah, happily ever after, right? Not so fast. This is sort of exactly that. Once I saw that DC Vampires sales were good enough to have spin-offs and one-shots or whatever, this is exactly what I expected. Now, does that mean that this isn't what they had in mind all along? No, I wouldn't say that. Maybe Tynan and Rosenberg had this ambiguous quote-unquote ending all along, which clearly is going to lead into the next one where we have a new leader of the vampires. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. It was so cliched. Sometimes it's okay, writers. Sometimes it's okay to have the last issue, to have the ending be an ending. Not everything has to be, that horror movie where, oh, the monster's arm moves at the end, even though you thought he was dead. Like, it's so old and tired at this point. Like, again, this is 100% what I expected. It's not the end, just like with Deceased, and I'm sure it will be the same thing with Dark Knights of Steel. Um, Enough people like this. Hey, let's keep telling stories. I'm sure this is like you just said, a world in the DC multiverse. There's an infinite number of them, but I'm not particularly interested in reading any more of this. Who's left to kill? By the way, we've had so many shock killings at this point. Who's not dead? So I'm over it, to be honest with you. And as I've said all along, I'm a huge Otto Schmidt fan. I absolutely love his run on Green Arrow, but throughout the series, the art that he's done here has been looser, and I haven't enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed his previous work, and that continues in this particular issue. It does suit the sort of kinetic and violent style of this vampire story, and certainly his color work. Again, lots of reds and oranges. Well, it's vampires. It's the end of the world. You would expect that, and they're darker, hues of those colors. Because again, it's a darker palette overall. It's the end of the world. But just the way, like, think about the way this thing was paced and plotted. It started off so slow. First couple issues take place over the same day, and then it speeds up to the point where months pass between issues. So I thought it was a strange choice as well. But again, I mean, they didn't. I imagine if they knew how successful this was going to be ahead of time, they would have taken their time. We probably wouldn't have got the shock killing that we got at the end of this issue until the end of the second volume. And I've said before, I feel like the whole reason they picked Dick Grayson to be the Lord of the Vampires was because shock value, like the least likely person to, turn evil, as it were. Not that he sees himself as evil and he gives his kind of speech or whatever, but yeah, you can throw this up there with Tom Taylor's Dick and Babs, or Sean Gordon Murphy's Dick and Babs. So again, it feels like cheap shock value to me to have her be the one that takes him out. But anyway, what were your thoughts?
Well, I actually I agree with every comment you made. But I'm just going to add, I'm going to focus a little bit just more on the plot line here. Barbara Gordon was an idiot. What was her master plan? Apparently, Barbara Gordon's plan to defeat Dick Grayson, the king of the vampires. And this was apparently her plan. Her plan was to sacrifice herself all along. And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, she actually planned to become queen of the vampires. She intentionally goes in. Yeah, she planned it. She goes in knowing she knows Nightwing's going to bite her, and then she has Nightwing bite Harley. And Harley, we know from a previous one shot, Harley's blood will kill a vampire. So Nightwing then dies. Well, then Barbara becomes the new queen, and because she's a queen, she's the automatic ruler. So Wonder Woman can't kill her. So she controls all the vampires. So then she's talking about ruling. So she's just as bad as Dick now. She's possessed by whatever the vampire mind control is, that suddenly she's now bad. And meanwhile, Supergirl takes out Martian Manhunter, and so Supergirl's back on the playing field in Australia. Okay, so now we're gonna have like Barbara Gordon as Queen of the Vampires versus Supergirl leading what's left of the human race in this issue called Dawn, moving forward into an infinite number of Earths, which remember that DC Vampires was one of the Earths named in Dark Crisis Big Bang. So we already know that this universe has its own Earth. So that was probably a clue that this story's not going to end. But just from a plot perspective, number one, I'm less interested in moving forward. If this was going to move forward, I didn't want Dick Grayson to die, to be honest with you. I would have preferred that there'd have been will they or won't they, maybe even a king or queen sort of interplay between Babs and Dick. So I disagree with the narrative choice made if this is going to be ongoing. And second, and you hit the nail on the head, most of the interesting players are dead. They're off the playing field. I mean, this is not as fun to me moving forward. Now, I know people will say, okay, there's no such thing as, there's doesn't matter what characters are left. You get a good writer. The good writer can make it work. Well, yeah, I guess, sure, and yeah, I guess, and even dead vampires aren't really dead. You can always bring them back too, I suppose.
I don't know. It's harder, man. They turned to dust. They crumbled to nothing. Like, how do you put them? Like, are you going to bring back Hal Jordan or not Hal Jordan? You're going to bring back Zan, right? Zan and Jaina, the half of the Wonder Chief. The guy got pureed. He got frappéed in a blender. You're going to bring him? How are you going to bring him back? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and one final, and it's a criticism here, is that if you're going to if there's going to be future stories on this, I never really got a sense as to the actual world itself. Every single issue, whether it was a one-shot or this series or the black and white and red series, All Out War, everything had to do with the heroes battling heroes or villains battling heroes and infected battling. And I never got a sense of the larger world proper. I never got a sense. Everything was always so dark and gloomy, and it was just hero versus villain, villain infected versus hero infected versus. And I never really. It wasn't like Injustice where I got a good sense of what's left of the world at all times. It wasn't like Dark Knights of Steel where I feel I'm getting to know the world, the larger world proper, in addition to the interchange and the character motivations moving forward. This very much was just one long battle sequence of two kids in a sandbox playing with action figures, and that's pretty cool. But that's also why I wanted an ending. you know, when I play with my action figures, somebody wins and somebody loses. You know what I mean? So I can kind of sympathize. But I can kind of see DC, like you said, they got something successful here, so they don't want it to go away. So they can always go back to it, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There was potential for less cliche, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess that's my biggest complaint. It's just, even the story that we got was just so, like, I could have seen this coming a mile away. Now, granted, this whole idea of Barbara was always planning on getting bit, that came as a bit of a surprise, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the fact that we didn't really get an ending, yeah, that wasn't a surprise in the slightest bit. So expect more DC versus vampires going forward, like 100%. So all right, moving on. Speaking of endings and worlds, we know this comic has its own world as well. DC Mech finale from writer Kenny Porter. Valdemar Rivas is the artist, Mike Spicer on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. This is a case where certainly as the story went on, it got a lot better. I think once the quote unquote infighting stopped between these versions of Batman and Superman, and they actually started focusing on fighting Darkseid, it got a lot better. I'm still not a big fan of saying that the mechs themselves are the things that have the superpowers, or the superpowers of the individuals power the mechs. I just, like, why have a mech? Like, just fight, like, why does Superman need to be inside a mech to ultimately defeat Darkseid? So that's a little problematic for me. I am also not the biggest fan of Valdemar Rivas' style of art, but I get why they chose him as an artist, because his style is much more of a manga style, and this whole idea of people fighting in giant robots, that's certainly very much a manga idea in terms of BattleTech or Robotech or any of that sort of thing. So so I thought this ultimately was just okay. I think it'd probably read better as a trade than it did as the individual issues, but I still think they leaned a little bit too much into the Batman, Superman, and the rest of the heroes kind of fighting amongst themselves early on, and it didn't work as well for me as it could have. I mean, because there's certainly a viewpoint that you could take where you could say, okay, this 6 issues is analogous to the first 6 issues of Jeff Johns' Justice League when the New 52 started, right? Like, it's the heroes of the Justice League coming together, and that's what we see revealed at the end of this on the final pages with this version of this Mech Justice League. We've got what I assume is Hawkman, we've got Green Lantern, we've got Batman, Superman, and Flash. So very similar to what we had in the Jeff Johns run. So ultimately it's okay, probably a bit forgettable. What did you think?
Well, this is also a series that, like DCV Vampires, it also was designated its own Earth in Dark Crisis Big Bang, so we can always go back to DC Mech. I think that this is it is somewhat of a tropey and cliche sort of combination of Transformers and combined with the DC heroes, but it's fun. I actually enjoyed this issue. This was my favorite so far. In previous issues, you did most of the talking because I kind of skim-read the issues. I actually read this one, and I enjoyed it. I love how when Darkseid sort of transforms into his transformer mode, it's actually the entire planet that is Darkseid. That I thought that was kind of cool, because naturally when the mother box initiates conqueror mode, the whole planet turns into a giant Darkseid, the ultimate mech, and I thought that was pretty cool. And it had some the visuals here were quite good, and the visuals actually in this entire series have been very, very good. And I can definitely see someone who's just, this story does have, this 6 issues has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And this actually has an ending that, oddly enough, it feels a little bit more satisfying than the one in DCV Vampires, which is kind of odd for me to say. But the bad guy's defeated, Darkseid's defeated, and the Justice League of the Justice League mechs, or the Justice Squadron as they're called, the Justice Squadron, they're now protecting Earth. And I can't remember the number designated to this Earth, but I thought this series accomplished what it needed to do. And frankly, if you're going to come up with different ideas for different Earths, I suppose you could do worse than Transformers and DC Heroes combined. So all in all, not bad. And I actually like the cover on this one too, with the black and the red. I thought it was a nice combination.
Yeah, again, I think there must be an audience for this. I'd be curious. We'll know how much of an audience and how vocal they are by how quickly we get a second series of this. So, okay, up next we have Harley Quinn number 25 from writer Stephanie Phillips. Artists are Matteo Loli and David Baldione. Colors by Rain Barreto. Letters by Darren Bennett. We found out last issue that the person that killed Harley and necessitated her being resurrected in a Lazarus pit by her sidekick Kevin was the Harley Who Laughs Last. So this issue kicks off Who Killed Harley Quinn Chapter 4 with us getting a glimpse of old lady Harley. And she travels back and ends up meeting up with our Harley and fighting against the Harley Who Laughs. And apparently the Harley Who Laughs is going around trying to kill all the Harleys of the multiverse, which if there's an infinite number, like we were just talking about, wouldn't that be an impossible task? Like she'd never be able to actually finish it. And so old lady Harley and the Harley of the main DCU team up to take on the Harley Who Laughs Last with a little assist from Killer Frost. But she's not that easily defeated. And it looks like we're going to have a whole host of different Harleys from different multiverses show up. We get that final scene to be continued, and we see a bunch of different versions of Harley. One's like a pirate Harley with a eye patch. One's the Batman animated series with the old school costume and the hammer. And we've got one that looks like almost an imp, a fifth dimensional imp. We've got a robotic looking one. We've got one that looks Asian, I guess. So yeah, bunch of different Harleys. One's a mermaid. I don't know. All I could think when I saw this image was, at some point, shouldn't there be like a council of Harleys that are like, I don't know, passing judgment on things? Or I think that would be a fun idea. But anyway, if you're a Harley fan, you're going to love this, because we're certainly getting like a lot of Harley for your dollar, for your comic dollar. A lot of bang for your buck here. And it's fun. It's fun, and it feels very Harley. Maybe the most traditionally Harley Quinn story that Stephanie Phillips has given us throughout her run. I thought the art was fantastic, particularly old lady Harley. Like, I love the way that she looks, especially under the David Baldione, on the David Baldione art pages. She just looks fantastic. So yeah, I'm enjoying this. This is just fun, lighthearted Harley where you don't have to think too much. And so, not to say that it's bad when you have to think. I love comics that make me think. And Stephanie Phillips has given us a lot to think about in terms of Harley and redeeming her and whatnot. So, but it feels like she's going out on as I said, a traditional Harley story that's just a whole heck of a lot of fun with, many, many different versions of Harley. So we'll see how it all plays out. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wish she would make us think, because she's missing out on an opportunity here, and unfortunately, just when she's finishing her run. Because there's some moments here where there's actually moments between the old Harley, who is 50 years old, and this young Harley who Let's say she's 25, because it is the Harley Quinn issue 25. In any event, we got a younger Harley and an old Harley, and they're intermingling, and they know that ultimately they're going to be facing the Harley who laughs. And we know the Harley who laughs is, if it's anything like Batman who laughs, so they, at least our Harley knows that they're going to have their hands full. But at one point, Harley wonders about the other Harleys in the universe, the multiverse, and she says, some of us, we might meet some Harleys who never left the Joker, or some who maybe even never met him. And imagine what we must be like in those other universes. Those questions are posed here, but we're never going to get the answers to them. Instead, unfortunately, everything's played for a joke at the end. And I get it. That's a choice. This is a Harley comic. You can go zany, you can go crazy. But I personally would love a deeper exploration. I would actually like to see a Harley. Now, you and I both know we get all kinds of different iterations of Harley in pop culture as it is, and we've gotten that in the Black Label series with Harleen, and we've gotten that in other iterations and what have you, other Black Label stories. Nonetheless, this is the multiverse that you can play with. You're playing with a multiverse of Harleys, and unfortunately, I think the reason why I'm a little disappointed so far is that the final page, we get all these other versions of Harley, and all we are getting is different artistic renditions of Harley. Okay, we get a Harley Mite, a Batmite version, and then we get like a small infant child Harley. Then we get what looks like maybe a black Harley, and then a pirate Harley, and a traditional Harley, and then a fairy Harley, and a mermaid Harley, and blah, 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 blah. That's all well and good, but those are visual representations. I want character work. I want to get to know these characters.
I like that next issue.
Yeah, no, I hope we do. I hope we do. And I say that, and it may sound, maybe it's an underhanded compliment that I'm getting. I intend it as a compliment. I don't want to have this be a put down, because I like the idea. I like what Stephanie Phillips has done here, has introduced us. If we're going to get a multiverse of Harleys, instead of just a bunch of Harleys telling the same joke or trying to tell a different punchline, I'd like to see some character work here. And there were moments here between old Harley and our Harley that I thought were particularly heartfelt. And they looked like they were going somewhere, but they were always interrupted by some superfluous action or some other something else going on. And I just thought that there was missed opportunities here. But again, fantastic art, great action sequences, and there was some good art. There was even some funny dialogue with with old woman Harley saying she couldn't imagine a multiverse where she'd ever be caught dead wearing that, and pointing to another Harley, or to the Harley who laughs. And there were some moments here, but I'm still hoping that we get a little bit more, hopefully some more character work, but unfortunately we might not, because it's just too close to the end of Phillips' run.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, and if that's what you're looking for, yeah, we may or may not get it. I'm not enough of a Harley fan to really care if I get character work on the Harley Mermaid version. It's enough. Those heartfelt moments between old lady Harley and regular Harley are enough for me. So, but yeah, I mean, somebody who's a bigger Harley fan may want more. But you would if you had something like a council of Harleys, like I said, and having them play off of each other. So, all right, up next, Tim Drake Robin #4 from writer Megan Fitzmartin, Riley Rosmo on art, Lee Luffridge on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. We get the reveal of the villain who has been killing people and sending these weird ghost-like apparitions against Tim. I'm still not a fan of Riley Rosmo's art. It works better on some series than others. In fact, we were just talking about Harley. I feel like it works better on Harley than it does on Tim Drake. But I do feel like he is settling in on Tim Drake, and this is the best art we've seen on the series so far. Kind of the tightest line work and the best storytelling in my mind. And we're also feels like we're getting some good, solid forward momentum on the story with Tim finally confronting this villain. I don't think this is a villain that's we've seen before. Please correct me if I'm wrong. When he does talk to Tim, he says, "I want to be the best villain." What does the best villain have? Dapper costume, killer name, most of all, worthy opponent. So it seems like he's trying to make a name for himself, fighting against Tim Drake Robin. He certainly has some long hair and some interesting style and clothes, which Riley Rossmo does a fantastic job of rendering this villain. Kind of has this two-tone face too. It's kind of interesting. So I guess we'll find out who it is at some point. I know that this series, it seems to be a bit divisive. I think Megan Fitzmartin is juggling a lot of different things, and it's a challenge. I don't know that she's, I know she's not trying to please everybody. She's just trying to tell the best story that she can. And you're going to have traditional Tim Drake fans are like, don't like the fact that he's in a same-sex relationship. You're going to have others that don't like the fact that he's sort of isolated from the rest of the Bat family, or I should say not the Bat family, but from Bruce himself. Because he does reach out to the Batgirls here. He does reach out to Stephanie and Cassandra Cain. So it does feel like overall DC editorial is pushing like a younger feeling versions of these characters. You know, we Rocky and I have talked a lot about it in the Batgirl series, how young Cassandra and Stephanie feel. And yeah, this is, Tim should be in his early to mid 20s by this point, but he feels very much like, I don't know, 19 years old. So I don't know if that's a editorial choice or just a coincidence from the writers. Maybe it's just DC's picking pitches that tend to feel more young. I'm not 100% sure, but I look forward to having Megan Fitzmartin on the show at some point to talk about this, hopefully sometime soon. So I know you haven't been a fan of the series. What do you think of this issue?
Well, I'm still not a fan of the series. I'm not collecting the physical copies of this, which is pretty rare because I'm, this and there's only maybe 2 or 3 DC series that I'm not getting, and this is one of them. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of the story. I still don't think the story makes any sense. I've got no desire to really try to figure out exactly what's going on. But I did read this, and I actually read this issue twice, and the mystery that writer Megan Fitzmartin is trying to create here is it's just not coming together very well. It just doesn't make any sense. It's old school laser print paper with ciphers on it linked to books that this new villain, who frankly looks like a flamboyant gay man from the 70s, which would be in keeping with basically her theme for the entire thing. To what end? And then the floating white discs that I made fun of and joked about apparently make their appearance again. And the floating white discs create an object from one of the books that apparently Tim Drake thinks is part of some mystery. And I don't know, for some reason, this guy, this new villain, the best villain, which is, if that's his name, what an unoriginal name. I don't understand. I just don't get it. Apparently people on the marina are getting killed. The bad guys want to clean out the marina, but the marina is being rented. And even Tim Drake, who's, I'm sure, a multimillionaire, he's got a huge fund related to Bruce being part of Bruce Wayne's family there. For some reason, he's got to pay rent at the marina because it's owned by the city or something. And people in the marina are being slowly, they're being fired, so they don't have a job, so they can't pay their rent around the marina, so they can get evicted. And what that has to do with murders, I really don't know. I find it interesting that the other comic book that I'm also not buying, the Batgirls, naturally they make an appearance in this comic, another comic that I'm not regularly buying the physical copy of. You sort of said it. I don't know why the Batgirls are even necessary here. I don't know why, but I mean, anything to make this book maybe a little bit more interesting. But I just don't get it. I don't understand the appeal of this comic. It's just fair to say that it's not for me. But I will say that this story itself it's just really, really hard to get into. This is not an interesting story to me at all. And then Bernard. Bernard actually at one point, he actually couldn't tell. He sends, he has Robin last issue in his boat in the marina. He doesn't recognize that Tim Drake is Robin yet. And it's almost like he's being flirty with Robin. And it's just, I don't know. It just gives me the willy nillys. I mean, it just the thing is just creepy in an uncomfortable way, and the artistic style doesn't help. And I'll just stop talking. But this is definitely not for me. And you know, you say it very diplomatically. There's at least 3 people I know at the comic shop that I frequent, longtime friends of mine, and 2 of them are huge Tim Drake fans, and they are absolutely eviscerated and heartbroken at this series. And because I go to them and say, what am I missing? And they say, you're not missing nothing. They don't like it either. And they don't like it. I'm actually defending this to them, saying, well, you know, this isn't that bad. Well, it's this, that. I'm explaining it to them. And, you know, I'm trying to give this plot line here in Robin some credence. And, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know what Tim Drake is doing. I don't know why he's there. I don't know why he wants to be a college dropout. I don't know why he wants to live in a shithole on the marina. I don't know why he's restricting himself to such a limited dating circle, having just, you know, had a great girlfriend. But I mean, I guess that's up to him. I don't know. I mean, how far the mighty have fallen. I mean, he used to be Batman's arguably the best Robin, and look where he is now. Oh my God. I mean, honestly, I just throw my hands up in the air when I think of where DC thinks they want to take this character. And man, get rid of Bernard. God, it's killing this title. I'm telling you, get rid of this. Anyways, I'm done ranting.
Yeah, you're like, I'm going to stop talking, and then you went on. You went on. uh, you think Bernard is just a really like a bad character?
Yeah, he just makes the character. He makes Tim look stupid, and makes Tim is stupid the way he is around Bernard, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the way that she's forcibly trying to put Bernard into these stories, and why? And even taking Tim Drake, he's got no connection to the Bat family, not really. He's just living on a boat. Is he broke? And she tries to create the illusion of Tim Drake being broke by saying, well, no, I'm going to make him pay rent, even though he's a billionaire. I'm going to make him pay rent. So I'll put him on a marina.
Tim Drake is not a billionaire.
Not a billionaire. He's got more money than you or I have in the bank. That I can guarantee.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I think the point, and this is what we'll talk about when Megan comes on, is he's trying to figure out who he is. Now, I don't know that this series is necessarily for me either, but I'm certainly getting more out of it than you are. And I do not like when you say that Bernard makes Tim look stupid. I don't get that at all. If anything, Bernard's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, you know, but to have Tim, somebody that, you know, he's intimate with or whatever, and he's sitting right there just because he has this domino mask on, you can't tell it's him. Like, forget about the whole shower thing or whatever. Just him sitting there. But then you could say the same thing. You could say the same thing for the last 8 decades of anybody who's spent any time with Clark Kent and spent any time with Superman. So I'm not going to, you know, blame Megan Fitzmartin and say, oh, Bernard's a complete moron because, you know, he can't tell that Robin and Tim Drake are the same person. You could say the same thing. I mean, Batman's got half his face covered. I don't care if somebody's got half their face covered. You can still tell who people are. You know, just because you lower your voice and talk like this, I'm Batman, it doesn't mean you can't figure out who people are. And there's none of that. There's no cowl on Tim Drake. He just wears the tiniest mask possible, what's called the domino mask. That does not, like, how would you, the hair is the same, the voice is going to be the same. Like, it's ludicrous to think that Bernard would not know that that's Tim Drake and Robin are one and the same. But again, you could say the same thing about before Hal Jordan and Green Lantern, before his identity was revealed. You could say the same thing about Superman, whose identity just got put back in the, back in the bottle. Genie put back in the bottle. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, I mean, is this the perfect comic? No. Can I respect what Megan Fitzmartin is trying to do? Yeah, I can respect what she's trying to do 100%. And I get that she's getting a lot of pushback from those people that say, hey, Tim Drake's my favorite Robin. This doesn't make any sense. You know, Tim Drake's my favorite Robin, and this does make sense to me, but I've had the advantage of talking to Megan and understanding, where she's coming from, and it does make a lot of sense. And she can put it more eloquently than me, but I'll just say this, right? That Tim has always been a character that defined himself by the challenges that he faced in terms contextually of how other people perceived him, right? Like, I want to be Robin because I figured out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. So I want Bruce Wayne's approval. I want Batman's approval. There's some hero worship going on there. So Tim's worth is in proving to Bruce Wayne that he's worthy to be Robin. Same thing with his father. Same thing when he wants to prove that he's a good son, prove that he's capable. His father found out he was Robin. His mother was killed, whatever. All that adds to him, but they're all external. Those are all external forces. Then look at that series, the Chuck Dixon series that ran, for 100 plus issues in the 90s into the early 2000s. A lot of that was Tim going to school. A lot of that was Tim, will he, won't he have a relationship with Stephanie Brown? And again, it's Tim, being the smartest guy in class and having the expectations and, getting good test scores and whatever. That's all to get the approval of those around him, right? Again, it's all external. It's all external with Tim. When you stop and think, okay, who are you? What's your self-identity? I don't know that Tim's ever discovered that. And I think, again, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think that's what Megan is trying to do here. Like, if you strip all that other stuff away, right? Like, take away Bruce Wayne, take away the mansion, take away his family money, take away high school, support, take away that other supporting cast he had in Tynan's detective run, take away any sort of structure with him going to college, and strip him down bare bones. Who is Tim Drake? Who is Tim Drake to himself? Like, I think that's what she's going for. And again, we'll talk about it when she comes on the show, but I'm 100% on board with that. And I think Tim comes out better on the other side. And I never liked him. And I'm not saying that I'm a big fan of Bernard or his relationship with Bernard, but I can't stand Stephanie Brown either. And I don't want him with Stephanie Brown. I'd rather see him, whether it's a man or a woman, with somebody has a little more substance. Because to me, and again, we haven't gotten a lot of characterization for Bernard, but to me, Bernard, he's sort of a little bit of a limp noodle to me. Like, there doesn't seem to be much to him other than it's kind of like, right, their relationship is defined by the fact that they're kind of both in their first same-sex relationship. And so it seems like there's this like lovey-dovey cutesy kind of thing going on between them. And I would prefer a more mature romantic relationship, whether it's with a man or woman, I don't care. But again, that might also be because this Riley Rosmo art it's a juvenile style, as much as it's a loose style and a stylized version of comic art. And so I find it very telling that the two books you're not buying are the ones that have that style of art. So I think that goes a long way toward establishing the tone of the book.
But I don't. I mean, look, deconstruction when it's done right, and you're talking about a form of deconstruction, the way she's deconstructing Tim Drake, and there's different ways that you can go about it.
I disagree. I don't think it's deconstruction. Deconstruction would be, you take him if he's at a certain point and you kind of break him down to build him back up. She's stripping away all those external forces that defined him.
Deconstruction. That's a form of deconstruction. What she's doing here is she's taken him out. She's made him, to me, virtually unrecognizable. This is not the Tim Drake I know at all. Now, granted, I wasn't the number one Tim Drake fan. He's my least favorite Robin, straight up. But if this is the way to get me interested in him, okay, break him down. I would rather do a Born Again, rip this guy a new. I mean, put him through the ringer here. What's she doing? I mean, he's just suddenly decided, well, he's not going to live with Bruce. He's not going to go to college. He's just going to meander around and find himself.
That's the point. He doesn't know. The point is he doesn't know who he is. That is not okay. We've talked about this before. We've talked about this before with Tim. Because you went to high school, then went to college, then went to law school and knew exactly what you wanted to do and followed your path or whatever. That's great for you. And maybe that's exactly why this book is not for you. But there's plenty of young people out there who are going to identify with Tim because they don't know. There's people that went to high school, then went to college and changed their major 6 times because they didn't know what they wanted to do. That's this Tim Drake. He doesn't
Well,
know.
obviously, it's just Tim Drake. I'm just saying it's. I don't find. I don't find it particularly compelling. But hey, I hope you're right, and look, let a lot of people that this speaks to a lot of people. I need the story. I get if this is a young man trying to find himself, but I wish this story is just. It's not grabbing me, and the manner in which it's going about doing so. It's just not
I mean,
working.
you say you she's so who's Tim Drake? Like when you think about okay, I can define Dick Grayson. You know, he's the one that embodies heroism in the DC universe. You know, and I can define Jason Todd. He's this bitter Robin who carries a chip on his shoulder because Bruce didn't save him from the Joker. You know, I can define Damian as this legacy character who feels like he has his father's uh, mantle to prove himself worthy of. And then when I get to Tim Drake, I'm like, okay, well, he's really smart. Oh, wait, that's not, doesn't have to do with his personality. Well, he's this guy who's always looking to please other. Oh, wait, that's not, there's, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing internal. Where's the internal definition of Tim Drake? I don't feel like we've ever gotten it. Like, this story that Megan's telling, I think the seeds have been planted like all along. The clues were there, and that's why I kind of have a problem when people go that she's ruining him or she's contradicting everything that came before. I don't. I just feel like he Tim Drake in a lot of ways has been a plot device. He hasn't been a fully realized character, and I never realized it until I had the conversation with Megan. So again, maybe that's the key. Maybe that's why I'm enjoying this, and others aren't. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I respect the fact that you got that out of your conversation with Megan. He was a fully realized character under Chuck Dixon, and I think that that wasn't 100 issues of fluff. That was character development, and this to me this sort of says that he was a blank slate, and Megan is now trying to fill in the blanks, and maybe for a new generation that's all well and good. I thought he's not quite as much of a blank slate as Megan is approaching this character as. And again, look, I've said this before. No matter how much I take issue with this story, any character is only one good story away from being interesting. I just don't find this story particularly compelling, and I'm not really sure that whatever path he's on right now. I guess if you don't know where you're going, any direction matters, right? That's how I feel about Tim Drake. He doesn't know where he's going. Readers don't know where he's going, so it doesn't matter where he's going, does it? So
I guess where should he go? I mean, we talked about this when we talked about.
That's up to the writer to make it interesting and compelling. You find it interesting and compelling, and I don't. And I guess we're just going to have to leave it at that. And I will happily, if this suddenly ends up with a revelation where I'll say, aha, that's where this is going. I got no problem putting my foot in my mouth because I've done that before. But I just don't see I don't see anything on the horizon where I'm going to look with Tim Drake.
Where are any of the Young Justice characters going? Whether it's Tim Drake or Bart Allen or Cassie Sandsmark, we talked about, or even Connell to some extent. Like we talked about this when we talked about those characters, right? Like DC has, because they have now created new versions. Whether it's Wallace West or Damian Wayne or Yara Flor or whatever. Now their focus is on the new. And it's like, where are those 90s legacy characters? Like they've left them nowhere to go. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Sadly, no, I don't disagree with you. So, but this is, I think our discussion here sort of underscores the frustration that that the readership has on both sides. I mean, you're more in support, and I'm less so, and it's just sort of like the vagaries of and the joys of reading comic books. So it'll be interesting to see what the future of Tim Drake holds.
I feel like all those Young Justice characters are getting the short end of the stick. Like I love Cassie Sandsmark. Cassie Sandsmark is one of my favorite DC characters, and I don't feel like she's ever gotten her due. So, all right. Up next, I don't have much to say about this at all, other than I'm just not caring for it. Speaking of books that aren't for me. So maybe I feel about this the way you feel about Tim Drake Robin. Punchline, The Gotham Gang, Part 3. Tinny Howard, Blake Howard, writers, Max Raynor, artists, Luis Guerrero, colors, Becca Carey on letters. I don't understand Punchline at all. She seems totally psychotic and insane, and like I can't form complete sentences. I can't think logically. I like, why would anybody want to have anything to do with her or be within 50 yards of her? She's completely nuts. Like, you know, I don't know if you've ever met one of those people that when they drink, like they can go from being like super happy, super excited, whatever, to like despondent, crying, ready to kill themselves, and then 5 minutes later they're happy again. You know, that's Punchline. Like, she's just, I don't know. Maybe I've dealt with too many drunk people in my life when I was bartending in college. This is just not enjoyable. Not at all. I just don't care for Punchline as a character. It's a struggle for me to read this. Maybe it's my prejudice against a character that I go into each issue going, oh my God, I have to read about Punchline. But yeah, to me, there's nothing entertaining or redeeming about this series. The art is solid. Color work's great. It's paced pretty well, but the dialogue to me is cringy, and the story is just something I'm not in the least bit interested in. I've said it before, whether it's a Joker or whether it's Punchline, you know, get an actual superhero there, and it'll take about 5 seconds, and throw her in a deep, deep, deep dark hole, throw solitary confinement or whatever, and lock her up and throw away the key, and I don't ever need to see this character ever again. There is not a character at DC Comics that I dislike more than Punchline, with the exception of Amanda Waller. Like, the more I read of Punchline and the more I see her, the more I dislike her. She's a horrible, horrible character in my mind. And I could go the rest of my life, never read another Punchline story and be perfectly happy. So.
Well, you're just like poking the bear. You really want me to defend her now? Okay, coming off our Robin debate. Okay, well, I interjected, so I will try to. First of all, I think Punchline is still a character in need of desperate development. Now, what this issue does is writer Teenie Howard and Brian Howard. Now, we should remember that Teenie Howard is also the writer of Catwoman, and we just came off Catwoman issue 50, where Punchline was essentially involved in a debacle where Catwoman tried to defeat Punchline. Punchline escaped. Catwoman ended up protecting Batman and ended up killing Valmont. Selina is now in jail, and Punchline has fled the scene and has basically gone back to the Royal Flush Gang. They were injured in Catwoman 50, and a number of her characters were badly injured. And Punchline at one point in this issue, this is a key issue in one respect, and just a spoiler alert, I'm still not a big Punchline fan. However, I do want to. It should be worth noting what Teenie Howard and Brian Howard are trying to do.
Blake Howard.
Thank you, Blake Howard. What Teenie and Blake Howard are trying to do here, they're trying to give Punchline some reason to exist, which is exactly what underscores your frustration with the character and mine. You know, why does this character exist? I mean, she's cool to look at. She's a fashion. She looks sexy and cool, and she looks all you know like the sexy crazy bitch or whatever. But here she ends up killing a businessman in a penthouse in Gotham, and she's brutally beat this guy, and the guy actually looks like the Joker. And out of the blue, Punchline hallucinates this guy talking to her. The Joker talking to her. And it's through that conversation, it's an interesting conversation, the Joker's basically saying, well, what good is a joke with no punchline? It's almost as if we, the reader, are talking to Punchline and taunting her, saying, what are you doing? What's your purpose? And Punchline basically says that she's not doing this for the Joker. She says that. She says she's not doing it for the Joker. She's doing it because she wants the Joker's rep. The Punchline here, she wants to dump some toxic waste into some reservoir. She wants to have Joker's rep. She wants to have his reputation. She wants to get the attention. She's an attention seeker. That's what she wants. And this ties into her being wanting to manipulate social media. She wants to be, she likes the reputation. She feeds off the attention. And we got that in the Punchline backup series in the Joker, which I hated. I didn't like it. I thought it was badly written. But the ongoing theme was that she manipulated the media. She manipulated events. She paid off witnesses, killed witnesses, and she eventually got away with murder, literally. And then she was released from prison. And here she is trying to build up a rep. And she's got no problem becoming a criminal again, and she wants to one day have the reputation of the Joker. And it doesn't really work for me here, but I actually think where this particular issue shines is more with the Royal Flush Gang. We got more about this character Bluff, One-Eye Jack characters. It's the Punchline gang itself. Even Harper Rowe's brother, who has a relationship with Bluff, who is actually playing two sides. He's actually this Bluff character is actually a member of the Royal Flush Gang. He's almost like a double agent. He's a sidekick to Punchline, but he's also Harper Rowe's brother's lover. And Punchline ends up, and we get a rematch in of the Harper Rowe Punchline fight at the end of the Punchline backup series. But Punchline ultimately escapes, and ultimately Punchline takes off at the end, and it's ultimately, I would say it's interesting. I have to give Tini Howard some props here, because I think the Howards had the unenviable task of putting lipstick on the pig of that Punchline backup series, which I thought was terrible. And they have the unenviable task, because James Tynion, who created the character, never really gave the character a purpose. And we thought the character might have a purpose, but related to the Joker. And I personally think the Punchline is more interesting as a sidekick to the Joker, as a Harley Quinn who's still obsessed with the Joker. But they didn't do that. Instead, they want to, they want to give Punchline more agency, give her more independence. But now all she is just another one-note villain. And I personally wanted her to be more in control of the, I wanted her to be a little bit more beholden to the Joker. I wanted her to be a little bit more of a sidekick for a while before they rushed to some sort of defining of who she is, about trying to get the rep of the Joker too quick. I'm going to choose to have faith in the Howards here, that Tini Howard and Blake Howard are maybe going to Punchline. She has to get her comeuppance here. She has to be defeated. If she is not defeated, if this series ends with her running off into the frickin' sunset, if this doesn't end with her being defeated, humiliated, and put in jail, just like then how can she ever get the Joker's rep if she's never caught and constantly defeated but never caught? I feel that this is so wishy-washy with the way they're handling and approaching this character, but at least they're trying something. This is still a hell of a lot better than the backup series, and the jury's still out in terms of whether or not Tini and Blake Howard can nail the landing on this series. So I'm prepared to see this through to the end.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe it's if James Tynion doesn't leave Batman when he does, then she does get more character development and it ends up working. But yeah, it's just, again, I mean, I wasn't a fan when they created her, right? Like, I thought it was a poor choice. I mean, it was great that we got Harley away from the Joker and away from that, depiction of domestic violence and codependence and unhealthy relationship, whatever. And then at least she's not as beholden to the Joker as Harley was back in the day, but she's just not a character. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's a testament to how good of a character she is that I can't stand her. You're supposed to not like her, right? So kudos to everybody involved with Punchline. Yeah, I can't stand her. Good job. You succeeded. All right, moving on. Tales from Earth 6, a celebration of Stan Lee. So if you're not familiar, Earth 6, back in the day, there were these stories where Marvel Stan Lee came over to DC and was like, well, if I had created the DC universe, this is what it would have been. And I think the line was called Tangent. Back in the day. So we have Stan Lee's versions of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Shazam, Aquaman, Catwoman, Sandman, and the Justice League of America. So it's a big anthology, 107 pages, maybe a few extra covers here, so probably a 100-page giant. The Batman stories by Michael Uslan, Lee Weeks on art. The art is fantastic in that story. Trish Mulvihill on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. Superman by Mark Waid. Not exactly the Superman that Mark Waid wants to be writing, but Mark Waid's the writer. Kevin Maguire is the artist. Rosemary Cheatham on colors and Troy Petrie on letters. Wonder Woman story by Stephanie Williams. Belen Ortega is the artist. Jordan Belair on colors. Becca Carey on letters. Flash stories by Becky Cloonan and Michael W. Conrad. Pablo M. Collar is the artist. D. Cuniff on letters. D. Cuniff on colors. Steve Wands on letters. Green Lantern story by Kenny Porter. Carl Mostert is the artist. Romulo Fajardo Jr. on colors. Dave Sharp on letters. Shazam story by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. Juan Ferreira on art and colors. Becca Carey on letters. Aquaman story by Zach Thompson. Hayden Sherman is the artist. Nick Filardi on colors. Hassan Atzman Elhel on letters. Catwoman story by Megan Fitzmartin. Anthony Marquez on pencils. Mark Morales on inks. Dave Stewart on colors with Pat Broso handling the letters. And the Sandman stories by Steve Orlando. Max Dunbar is the artist. Sebastian Cheng on colors. Steve Wands on letters. And then finally, the JLA story is written and drawn by Jerry Ordway. Glenn Whitmore handles the colors. Pat Broso handles the letters. So overall, the quality of these stories is pretty high, especially when you start talking about who is drawing some or writing and drawing some of these. Like Mark Waid and Kevin Maguire. Like I'll read any comic those guys put out, and I'm probably going to enjoy it because that's a fantastic writer and a fantastic artist. I think the problem for me when it comes to Stan Lee's versions of these characters is if Stan Lee had created these DC characters back at the time when he created the Marvel characters in the early 60s, then I think a lot of these characters would probably work. The problem is, like, if you look at characters like, I don't know, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Spider-Man, whatever, any of the really famous Stan Lee characters that he created along with artists, back in the day, Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko or whomever, you're talking about characters that have evolved over time, right? Like, yes, the argument could be made that they've not as evolved as much maybe as they should have, like Peter Parker and a lot of these characters will be dead by now, right? If they aged in real time, they were created, 80 years ago. And if they're 20 years, that'd be 100, like it doesn't make sense mathematically. But the thing is that those stories were a bit more, I don't want to say simple, but maybe a bit more innocent in a lot of ways because times and storytelling back then were less complex than they are now. And so when you create these characters, and again, this was something Stan Lee did, the tangent, like late 90s, early 2000s. So even this is like 20, 25 years ago. So I think as time goes on and storytelling, especially in comics, has become more mature and more complicated, it makes it harder for these stories, which have a little bit of that sort of innocent throwback early Marvel era feel. It makes them harder to feel like relevant to now and the stories that we have now. So that's the problem that I have with these stories. Not that these characters wouldn't work. They're definitely funhouse mirror versions of the characters that we're used to seeing. And I think there's also some who's who type pages in the back with some fantastic artists. Like Jim Lee does the Wonder Woman rendition, and she looks fantastic. But I think these characters would work if, on a long enough timeline. But on a truncated timeline, they work less well. My favorites are probably Sandman, of all things. And this is not the Morpheus version of Sandman. This is more, almost a mix between the Wesley Dodd Sandman and with a little bit of supernatural thrown in. And probably the version of Superman that Mark Waid gives us here, which is obviously originally written by Stan Lee. So overall, like I said, the quality of the stories is good. If you've never read any of the Tangent stuff and you're curious, this is certainly a good book to pick up because it gives you a good feel of who each of these characters are. The art, without exception, is fantastic. The stories, for the most part, are really strong. There's some that are maybe average, but it's probably only one or two, and I'm not going to single them out. But for the most part, they're really really strong. But man, the Lee Week, they really did a great job starting off with Lee Weeks. His art and that first Batman story is just fantastic. And then you follow that up with Mark Waid and Kevin McGuire on Superman. Yeah, I was all in, even though I haven't read any of these characters since those original Tangent issues came out. So anyway, how familiar were you with Tangent? What'd you think of this? I think you're muted, Rocky. There we go. Nope, still muted.
Sorry, there you go. Sorry. It's been 20 years since I've read anything from Earth 6, and it was nice refreshing my memory. I think this is an absolutely excellent compilation of stories. I think if you want to, this would have been my dream as a young kid reading comics.
Yeah, hold on. Can I stop you right there real quick? One thing I forgot to mention. Sorry to interrupt. This is DC's tribute to Stan on his 100th birthday, and I find it shameful that Marvel gave nothing other than a one-page splash saying "Happy Birthday, Stan," as opposed to guys. Distinguished Competition is dedicating a whole 100-page giant to his memory. I just that's not right in my mind. Disney, do better. Sorry, I had to get off the mouth. Yes.
No, and I agree. But I just want to say, here's just a little bit of tidbit. What I like about this, all the characters here have their names all begin the same. The secret identity of the Earth 6 Flash is Mary Maxwell. Of Wonder Woman, it's Mary Mendoza. Of Green Lantern, it's Len Lewis, a professor. It's Shazam is Robert Rogers. Aquaman is Raymond. Catwoman is Joni Jordan. I mean, there's little. Their names are the same letters, and the only exception to that is Sandman, who was Larry Wilton, who was an astronaut. And the one unifying aspect of all of their origins is this green mist. This green substance actually forms part of the reasons why they end up with some of their powers, and their origins, of course, vary and are different, and it's very compelling, such so that even the formative event that brings them together to form the Justice League of America, or the Justice League, is the Lex Luthor of Earth 6 is this man by the name of Dominic Dark. And he is, and Adam Strange in this universe is the son of Dominic Dark, and it's Adam Strange who goes to the Justice League and wants to help recruit them to help do battle against the forces of Dominic Dark. And of course, Lois Lane is a talent agent, not a reporter. Snapper Carr is an interesting character who's basically there. He's good at working with the media, and he always has a plan. And the machinations and all these stories here in this I think was it 104 pages? How long this is? This is 107.
But yeah, I think some of those were the covers, but yeah, so I think it's probably 100 interior pages.
Right, but fantastic. This is all one magnum opus story that you get a very, very detailed snapshot of Earth 6, and kudos to DC for putting the who's who, explaining, giving further details, which is something they should do more of, because these are characters with rich backgrounds, and I personally felt like this is a story that I want to know more of. I thought these stories worked. I thought these characters were interesting. I got no problem if I got future Earth 6 stories. If there's a future multiversal saga, a future, maybe a crossover event between our Earth 0 and Earth 6 or whatever, I mean, I would welcome that. I personally wish they would have this same sort of compilation for another random Earth that we don't know about, or that it's just been hinted at. I actually quite enjoy this. If we're going to have compilations like this, give me a brand new universe with richly flushed out characters like this. Now, because, for all intents and purposes, we only saw these characters like whatever it was in 2001, 2002. I mean, it's 20 years ago. These are well done characters, and boy, can you absolutely tell that Stan Lee. You definitely pick up the Stan Lee vibe here, and talk about a who's who of talent. I mean, Stan Lee working with Jim Lee, Dave Gibbons, Scott McDaniel, Chris Bachalo. I mean, this is This is well worth the read. This is, in my view, if you want to pick up something, the most bang for your buck is probably this issue. Earth 6 is probably, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And I'm guessing it's probably a $10 comic. That's probably worth every penny.
Yeah, I would assume so, and some really cool covers to choose from as well. So, all right, up next we have the final issue of The Nice House on the Lake. James Tynion IV is the writer. Alvaro Martinez Bueno does the art and covers. Jordi Belair on colors and world design on letters. Variant cover by Andrea Sorrentino. Wow, long time coming. Took a bit of a hiatus in the middle even. This series has been excellent throughout, and I don't know. I feel like it ended on a pretty high note. And one thing I'll point out is on the cover, we finally got the 11th symbol. There was only supposed to be 10. And we know Walter snuck in an 11th member of the Nice House on the Lake. So what were your thoughts on this ending?
This is, a spoiler alert, I'm going to be doing my top 10 DC comics. And while this might be a cheat because it's a DC Black Label, but this might be close to my top. This is in my top 3 best DC comics of the year. Might even be number 1. I'm still thinking hard about it. This is fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. Talk about nailing the landing. I mean, nailing the landing in an absolutely epic way. I thought this was just absolutely epic. We've known that Walter's this alien that brought his 10 friends to save them from the Earth being destroyed, and we know that he could only save 10, but there wasn't there was an 11th one that was there that threw a wrinkle into things, and how it's resolved is so brilliant that the idea that Walter, this Nice House on the Lake is essentially one massive, it's a massive environment that you can control the environment. There's a mechanism that upon which Walter can control the environment, and which he, through a number of the different characters, have also, Nora and Ryan, various characters, have also controlled the environment and can also, in effect, control their immortality, control the degree to which they can be hurt, the degree to which they can remember. Their memories can be taken from them and then given back. And all of this is essentially controlled. And the revelations here, wow, talk about... all the big revelations are really saved for this final issue, too. And we got some whopping revelations in the first 11 issues, which were pretty cool enough. But this final issue, the whole idea of, the idea that they don't want... I almost don't even want to ruin it for people. I want them to read it because the revelation is just so epic. The whole idea that Walter wants them to live, but he also doesn't want his masters to discover that what they've done. He doesn't want his masters, his people, his other people in his that make up his alien race to discover that they know what they know. And he wants them to live and to thrive in this new environment, in this Nice House on the Lake. The rest of the Earth is in fact destroyed, though. That was confirmed. It's in fact destroyed. And he wants to keep them going, but they have a choice. They can either kill Walter and control it themselves, but eventually they're going to be discovered by his masters, and they're probably going to take him out. But the masters are very busy, and so they might not notice them. Or the other option is they can let Walter continue to control their environment and control their Nice House on the Lake and control their world and control their reality. But they don't want Walter to do that. And it deals so brilliantly with that theme of, what's free will? What's really free will? For some reason, is it free will if Walter is controlling their environment? They can still exercise free will, but the fact that Walter is controlling it takes away from their conception of free will. And yet the ending is so brilliant because they get their free will. Walter's taken off the table and they think they're in control, but they're not. But it's the illusion of free will that is important. So it's not, and that's the message here. It's almost like, it's almost such a deeply religious one in so many ways, because it's an allegory to the Messiah story. Nora knows the truth that Walter is still alive, but she can't tell anyone because if she does, it will it will stop their perception of the free will. They will feel caged and they will corrupt themselves. If they feel that they're being caged, if they feel they have no agency, if they feel they have no control over their environment and Walter's in control of everything, then they're going to lose their sense of free will. But yet, even when Walter's not off the playing field and he's removed from the playing field and he's taken out of the equation, they still don't have the free will, but they don't know that. But it's the illusion that they do that keeps them going.
Yeah, they don't see the puppet strings. They do not see the puppet strings, and that is what so fascinating. And I feel like what was so great about this book was it felt like it came full circle, right? With the way the first issue started off and the way the last issue ends here with Nora um, and Walter talking, because it's like it has flashed back and forth, a lot throughout with us early on in the series, first 6 issues, us seeing Walter interact with these um, 10 individuals before they were in the nice house on the lake. And then with Walter and Nora, conversing and her saying, well, in order for this to work, they have to not know that they're, that everything's predetermined, that you're, still alive, whatever. And even when Walter, allows himself to be quote unquote killed, and they sort of suspect, that's the other aspect of this. That's the other layer. They don't want to know. They don't want to know there are puppet strings. It's like ignorance is bliss. There's that layer as well, right? Like the rest of the world is gone. Like you can't control it. There's nothing you can do about it. Does it matter if you have puppets? Like, wouldn't you rather just try to live, especially if you're going to be immortal? Wouldn't you just want to try to live and be happy? Do the best you can with the circumstances because it is completely out of your control. Or you can choose to be miserable. So, yeah, fantastic story.
I like the way it was phrased. Nora says to Walter, Walter, you want us to be grateful to you for saving us, but we'll never be grateful for a cage we didn't choose. We'll never thank our jailer, even knowing the alternative. And yeah. Is that not an allegory to religion, to the way we view our lives? Is there an almighty God? Is there a creator? Are we in control of our lives? Do we have free choice? Is there predestination? Is everything predetermined? And ultimately, does it even matter? Like the fact that it ends with Nora being the only one that knows that Walter's still alive. She's the only one that knows, and she's got to keep that secret. And does she want to ruin it? Does she knows she can't tell them the truth because it might corrupt them, and that's the illusion of that they have freedom of choice is so powerful. And man, does it work. And incredibly, this is a perfect ending for me. I don't need another, at the end of this, it says this is the end of cycle 1. Is suggesting that there's other Walters out there. There's other enclaves of nice houses on the lake. There's other people like Walter that have saved their people. That was hinted at. So this is the end of cycle 1. So it makes you wonder where this story is going to be going, because Walter at the end does speak, and he talks of further obstacles that they will overcome in the future. So man, what a fantastic, the more I'm talking about it, this is probably going to be my number 1 pick for the year, spoiler alert, because this is just a fantastic ending.
Yeah, it's so good. And that quote you read about, we're never going to accept a cage we didn't choose. It's so often the cliche is, humans, they won't accept the cage. We have to have our freedom. They're self-aware enough they don't make that claim. Oh, we'll never allow ourselves to be caged. No, we'll never allow ourselves to be caged in a cage we don't choose, right? Because we all choose our own cages. We choose to, maybe this might be a poor analogy, but you choose to get married, right? An old ball and chain, or you choose to have a job, or we all live in a society. You got to follow the rules, and there's a certain aspect, certain way you could look at that and say, yeah, they're all cages in a way, right? They're all things that you have to put up with in order to like live and function in a society. So, and Nora, the burden of that, like what a strong character she is to have that burden and of the truth. And like, man, you wonder how long she can hold on to that. So yeah, fantastic story. All right. Up next, Action Comics number 1050. Whoa, lot to unpack here. Written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, Tom Taylor, and Joshua Williamson. We've got art by Mike Perkins, Clayton Henry, Nick Dragata, colors by Frank Martin, letters by Dave Sharp. Uh, Tons of variant covers. I'm not going to read all the cover artists because there's even a 1 in 500. There's so many variant covers. But basically, this is the story of how you put the genie back in the bottle. Like how did Superman get his secret identity back? So, um, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Man, I love Lex Luthor. God bless Lex Luthor, man. I love him because I don't care how they did it. I didn't care if I wanted the secret identity back, and it was such a stupid idea. Such a stupid idea by Bendis to take away, to reveal the truth. I hated it. Always hated it. Continue to hate it. I would have happily accepted a terrible story to bring back the secret identity. As it turns out, we got a good story bringing back the secret identity. One that actually works. One that possesses a high degree of verisimilitude, given what we know about the bastard known as Lex Luthor. And, God, goodbye, sweet Manchester Black. We hardly knew thee, but he wasn't a very sweet person anyway. It was tragic what happens to Manchester Black here. In a nutshell, Lex Luthor uses the telepathic abilities of Manchester Black, along with the orphan technology, the War World tech, to essentially make the world forget that Clark Kent is Superman. And as a consequence of that, they also forget that John Kent is also Superman / Superboy, whatever. And that the impact that has is obviously going to have ramifications for the DC Universe going forward. In a nutshell, the Kent farm is protected by a Justice League shield, so they're unaffected by that. Jay Nakamura, John Kent's boyfriend, he was in the Kent home when that took place, so he's unaffected by that. The Teen Titans, a lot of the other heroes who have psychic shields built in them, thanks to Martian Manhunter and their various battles over the many years, they are also were unaffected by the psychic or the mental manipulation that took away the memory that Clark Kent, the Kent family, is connected to of the Superman family. And anyone who remembers gets a stroke. So if they try to get people to remember the truth, you will actually cause them harm, and that even happens to Perry White here, where Perry White happens to coincidentally show up at the Kent farm for supper, and of course he's completely shocked to see, I'm here to visit Lois Lane and Clark Kent. Why is Superman here? Why are the Supermans here? Why is Jay Nakamura? I know that he's the boyfriend of one of the Supermans. Why is he here? Perry White, when they try to get him to remember, because they don't realize what's going on, Perry has a stroke. Fortunately, he survives, but it's very powerful. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it. I love this. I love the battle between, at the end, Lex Luthor explaining himself to Superman why Lex Luthor did it. He's saying, "Look, we grew up together in Kansas. We grew up together, Clark. I mean, and you had a secret and you didn't share it with me." But you shared it with the world. Well, screw you. I'm going to take away that secret. Now I'm the only one that knows, and the world doesn't. Screw you. You don't like it. I don't care. And this is sort of building on a great scene at the beginning before he kills Manchester Black. Manchester Black says, "By the way, Lex, you know what Superman always thought of you? Do you know what he really thinks of you? Nothing. He never thinks of you. You're never on his mind." And of course, that made Lex Luthor even more pissed off. And the character work in this issue, I really enjoyed this. I thought this worked. I'm just glad the secret identity is back. I'm just stunned that they actually made a good story out of it. Again, it's putting lipstick on a pig, but man, this is a good looking pig. What do you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. The interaction between Luthor and Manchester Black, you're right. Like, what's worse than you're talking about, you want to be liked, or, if you can't be liked, be hated. The worst thing is to be apathetic, right? To have somebody that he doesn't even think about you. You're not even a thought in his head. It's one thing. Oh, I love Lex Luthor. Oh, I hate Lex Luthor. Man, you're not even a thought in my head, Lex. what could be worse for a megalomaniac like Lex? And the other thing I thought, this totally burns out Manchester Black, like totally burns him out. Like it's just brutal what Lex does to him here. And all I could think was, what a far cry from the Lex Luthor that we got at the end of the Jeff Johns Justice League run, right? Where he was actually, and going into DC Rebirth, where he was actually a member of the Justice League and his armor had the Superman symbol on it and everything. This is not that Lex Luthor. This is not Jeff Johns Lex Luthor. This guy is as evil as they come. And just, what a great way to figure it out. I'm always really impressed that these writers, when they go to dial back a secret identity or roll it back, they find interesting ways to do it. Because Charles Soule had to do the same thing when he took over Daredevil. Mark Waid had made it public knowledge that Matt Murdock and Daredevil weren't the same for a long time. So I thought that was really fantastic. And then, of course, seeing Lex try to justify it, right? Like how, again, how perfect the characterization is for Lex in the hands of Philip Kennedy Johnson. The truth is a dangerous thing. I'm helping you out, the world cannot know that you are Clark Kent. The world needs to believe you're a god. Again, this is Lex Luthor's version. Like if I had your powers, this is his spin on it. You have to be above them, not one of them. And who is Luthor to make that decision, to decide? And so it's fantastic when Clark kind of loses his temper and takes Luthor and throws him onto the moon. You can tell he just, he's like, "You're helping me?" Man, like you can tell that Clark really wanted to not pull the punches,
Yeah. I just want to add, there's a great scene where it's just left silent. The art speaks droves about Luthor's narcissism. It's on page 19. It's probably not in the actual comic because I showed all the variant covers, but there's a picture. Lex is standing in front of a picture of himself, and right beside it is the Mona Lisa, and the Mona Lisa is small and insignificant, and it just looks so funny because he's standing. Here's the Mona Lisa, which I'm assuming that it's the real thing, but maybe it isn't. But knowing Lex, it's probably the actual genuine article, and beside it is this huge picture of himself, and it's one thing that it magnifies the narcissism of Lex Luthor, that he can't conceive of anything. No work of art, no bit of knowledge, no bit of, no concept, no person, no place, no thing can be greater than himself. Not even the Mona Lisa. Not even Superman. Not even he'll take it upon himself to know the truth. Better that he knows it and he's the only one that knows it. It's the extreme narcissism, and it comes across so well. This is so well played out in this issue that like I said, I was very, very impressed. And just the character work alone, the action sequences on the moon and everything else were sort of like window dressing, but was unnecessary because the character work alone. I mean, Lex Luthor won this round. Lex Luthor might end up in jail at the end of this issue, but make no mistake, Lex Luthor is the one that kicked Superman's ass this issue, and not just Superman, the whole Superman family.
You think so? I didn't take it that way at all. Because the revelation, like I agree, this is far and away my favorite issue that Philip Kennedy Johnson has done. Granted, he's got some co-writers on here, but I think this idea is something that three of them cooked up. But this is Kennedy Johnson doing the heavy lifting. Because you're right. This is all about Luthor, and he does win in terms of he's established a new status quo for Superman. But we learn that Superman himself has a new status quo as well, right? Because Luthor thinks he's giving voice to this idea that, hey, Superman, I helped you out. You need to be above them, whatever. But really, his true motivations for doing it is to throw Superman off his game, right? And ultimately defeat him, replace him, whatever. And during that battle out in orbit, he does say after Superman, he sees just how strong Superman is. Like, maybe I've underestimated him to some extent, because we know when he went to Warworld, his powers were waning. On Warworld, he didn't even have powers for the majority of the time. But as he's fighting Luthor in orbit, Luthor realizes, man, this guy's stronger than I remember him, to the point where he even says, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe things would be easier without you around. And keep in mind that this new war suit that Luthor's wearing is also Orphan Box and War World technology. And he teleports. He doesn't say how far, but he teleports Superman away. And he says, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe we'd be better off if Superman's not around at all. And he said, he took that poorly. Safe journey. Maybe I'll send your family to the Canis Major system to keep you company. He's like, wait, what? And Superman's back already. Like, he's back. Like, he sent him, in context here, must have been millions of light years away. And he says, you don't get it, Luthor. My mind and my body are stronger than they've ever been. Concepts like weight, distance, temperature, even space-time have largely lost their meaning for me. And the look on Luthor's face, like, he just sent Superman, so far away, and he's back almost instantaneously. And you can see the look on his face. He's like, oh, crap. And Superman even says, in moments, I can cross distances that cease to be distances. And I don't need your little metal suit or ray gun to do it. And another power we haven't seen before, he touches Luthor's suit and it completely just falls apart. And all that's left is like the life support helmet. And Luthor's like, oh, don't kill me. Like, he realizes how outclassed he really is. So, and Superman says, hey, you're going to prison for murder. So my question is, how much has Metallo leveled up? Because we know that Superman has recruited Metallo and has been doing so for the past few issues to go against Superman. And obviously he's going to have to be a threat. But it's almost like Philip Kennedy Johnson has dialed Superman's powers back up to, dare I say, pre-crisis levels. Like, he has never been, I can't remember the last time he was this powerful. Like, he shoots him thousands or millions of thousands of millions of miles or whatever away, and he comes back. He's like, yeah, space-time doesn't matter, weight doesn't matter, temperature doesn't matter. Like, true invulnerability again. Like, truly able to, like, fly. Like, can we get a new Superman Flash race with Superman at this new power level? How long will this last? It's got to be like a remnant of how he got recharged, right? With I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, on War World, the name of whatever the god was. Well, remember that he, yeah, the flame of Orgum, right? That he had momentarily, and he put it in the little boy and whatever. So it's got to be a side effect of that. Will it last? I mean, it'll last as long as Philip Kennedy Johnson wants it to last, right? Or maybe the following writer, and eventually he'll come back down.
Yeah, it should be noted about his, like, he's become uber Superman again, because and he was like that in the Silver Age. And guess who's a real big fan of the Silver Age, and you could tell by his writing in World's Finest.
Oh yeah,
Mark Waid. Mark Waid.
Yeah.
And Mark Waid always wants to write Superman. Mark Waid still isn't writing Superman. I mean, he is in World's Finest, but he's not writing a Superman title yet. But sooner or later he's going to be, and I like this. I like this return. Let's try a more uber Superman. And dare I suggest that if Superman is this powerful, how come he's having so much trouble against Failsafe? I mean, come on. Really?
Yeah, don't think about it too hard. Yeah, so I love it. Philip Kennedy Johnson showing his fantastic world building abilities once more. Luthor does end up in Stryker's Island at the end of the issue. That's storyline to be continued in Superman 1. That's Joshua Williamson's book. And then elsewhere in the multiverse, we get a little prelude of what we're going to see in Adventures of Superman John Kent. So if you listen to my Tom Taylor interview, granted, I know it was really short. DC was basically had Tom that day doing like one interview after another, so we only got about 10, 15 minutes each. But anyway, we know that there are different Supermen of the multiverse being killed, and it looks like Val Zod is out there trying to figure out, or maybe it's Calvin Ellis. I can never tell the difference between those two.
That's Val. I think that's Val Zod, but
yeah, I think it's Val Zod as well. I think that's what Tom said. But yeah, he's gonna basically recruit John Kent to come and help him out to find out who first of all, who's powerful enough to kill Superman, different versions of Superman throughout the multiverse, and how are they going to stop him? So yeah, all that plus just how powerful is Metallo if he can take on this uber Superman that we know that we have here. So yeah, this is my favorite issue of the Philip Kennedy Johnson era by far. It's not close. Like just seeing that uber Superman, he's like, man, space time doesn't even matter to me. Like, so you can time travel. Like, yeah, just awesome, awesome.
I am compelled to say that I think that, like me, I don't think Batman is losing any sleep over the fact that Lex Luthor won this round. Lex Luthor's not going to be in jail for long. I feel slightly differently than you on this. Even Batman says to Superman, "Is this really that bad a thing?" Because Batman was always leery about Superman, revealing his truth to begin with. It's because it was always a little bit uneasy. And if we actually look at the storylines since the truth reveal, the Kents were almost killed. They've been in harm's way in more than one storyline because of the revelation. And, you can talk your way around it and everything else. But the story potential is so much better. Think of the story potential now.
That's where I come out. Like, there's so much more story potential with him having a secret identity. Like, you're erasing decades of history by getting rid of his identity. Like, it just doesn't. It's part of his mythos. Superman, Clark Kent, change it into a phone booth. Like, I get it. We don't have phone booths anymore, but that's an iconic part of the myth. I think removing it, I can't even believe that Bendis got approval for it, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm so glad, and there's a wonderful scene where John Kent goes into a Starbucks or a coffee shop, orders a coffee, and they misspell his name John with an H on the coffee mug because they don't know who he is, and it's such a good scene, and I love what he says. John leaves the coffee shop and he says, "No, this is perfect." Because they tell him, he says, "You spelled my name wrong. Sorry, man. No, it's okay. This is perfect." And it is perfect. I think it is perfect because finally now he can actually get a secret identity. He needs one. He can't be Superboy / the other Superman all the time. He has to have a secret identity. He has to have a life outside of Jay Nakamura. Right. He has to.
Yeah, you're 100% right. That's what we need for him. But yet, and again, I'm not nothing against Tom Taylor, but it said we're not getting, like, can we get him in high school? Can we get him, secret identity, college, whatever it is? But no, instead he's going to fly off in the multiverse. So he's not going to even need a secret identity because he's going to be out there trying to solve this mystery. So, but we know there's more to come after that. Tom has already told us that. So, all right, let's move on. John Stewart, The Emerald Knight, #1. Gemini Lux from writer Jeffrey Thorne. Marco Santucci is the artist. Michael Attea on colors. Rob Lee on letters. This is the end of Jeffrey Thorne's hero-worshipping tale of John Stewart. It brought all the threads. Like, if you didn't read his Green Lantern run, Jeffrey Thorne's Green Lantern run, you'll be completely lost. So make sure you read that first, and then come and read this. And it's a satisfying conclusion. And we have Lonar and all the rest of the characters that we had in that Green Lantern run. They all show up here. It's a satisfying enough conclusion, I guess. We at one point get John Stewart like literally as an Emerald Knight. He's wearing armor, and I guess if you're a big John Stewart fan like Jeffrey Thorne is, you'll probably enjoy this. I thought it was just okay. I don't know what to expect from Mariko Tamaki on Green Lantern. I think that's a very unexpected choice.
Is she writing Hal Jordan or John Stewart? Mariko Tamaki.
They haven't said. I don't think they've said.
Oh, because I
think they've said that, but they're both in the book. But I don't know if one's going to be.
Well, PKJ I thought was John Stewart. I thought Philip Kennedy Johnson was writing Hal Jordan.
I could be wrong. I'll look that up while you give us your thoughts on this, because I don't really have much else to say. Just kind of glad this era of Green Lantern's over.
Tell you something. This is an absolutely huge revelation here. This is a game changer for John Stewart, because this ends with the god Isaac is defeated by having John Stewart have the god this Isaac basically choose his dimense. A dimense, when you're a god, you have to be a god of something. The source, the source which creates all life, when the source creates a god, when a god dies, the source recreates that god, but that god has to be the god of something. You have to be the god of war, the god of light, the god of nature, the god of journeys like Lonar. And Isaac is defeated. Isaac is all powerful. A god that is created by the source, apparently, that doesn't have a dimensi, doesn't choose a designation, is almost too powerful. So John Stewart basically has Isaac choose what kind of god they want to be, and it ends up being the god of nature, or the god of nostalgia of all things. In any event, where am I going with all this? What's this story really trying to say? Well, in the resolution of this, John Stewart actually pulls a version of himself out of hypertime. There's a point in the story where all of the where John Stewart and his 8 Emerald Knights, he divides 50% of his power and he creates 8 swords and gives Calabac and Kins and a number of these other knights a portion of his. What's that?
Kilowog. I think you said Calabac.
Yeah, sorry, Kilowog. Thank you. Yeah. Kilowog and Kenzin. They all end up with these 8 swords representing half of the power that he has of basically as an ascended. John Stewart is not a god, he's ascended. And so that means he's got the power of a god, but he's still human, I guess. And ultimately, John Stewart ends up picking a version of himself out of hypertime, because there's actually a beautiful image with where John Stewart is showing the Green Lantern a picture, or sort of a version of the multiverse where they can all see. I'm trying to find it here. They're trying to find the strands of the multiverse and the strands that they all branch off of. In any event, I can't seem to find it, but we have 2 John Stewarts now. He pulls a John Stewart out of hypertime. We now have a John Stewart that's staying in the dark sector and going to continue to fight with the Emerald Knights. And we're going to have the other John Stewart who goes back and is the John Stewart on Earth. And Xanshi, the planet that John Stewart ultimately ended up accidentally destroying, is restored. It was pulled out of hypertime and it now exists in our time. So it's now. So Jeffrey Thorne has done for John Stewart what Jeremy Adams has done for Wally West. That's how I put it. Every mistake that John Stewart's ever made has now been fully redeemed. The only thing that hasn't been, because Xanshi, the entire planet's back. We got 2 John Stewarts, not just one. So we get him to be the Emerald Knight in the dark sector. Now he can be ordinary John Stewart on Earth. And to top it all off, we've got John Stewart teasing that he wants to find his wife. That the John Stewart in the dark sector wants to find his wife who is dead. So because she's not really dead, because somewhere in hypertime, I imagine she's still alive. So there's a lot to unpack here. This is clearly a situation where if I didn't know better, I mean, we know that Jeffrey Thorne, the writer, got screwed over with Dark Crisis. He didn't even know that John Stewart was going to be killed with the rest of the Justice League. Joshua Williamson never gave him the memo. We know that Jeffrey Thorne's Green Lantern probably wasn't as well received as it was. It was kind of a little bit convoluted, but there was a lot of story there to unpack. And we know that moving forward, we got Marika Tamaki and Philip Kennedy Johnson writing John Stewart and Hal Jordan adventures.
Yeah, so Mariko Tamaki writing Green Lantern Corps would have multiple characters. It's called Green Lantern Corps. Hal Jordan will be in that book. And then the other one's called Green Lantern, John Stewart. And that's the one written by Kennedy Johnson.
Kennedy Johnson, right. And so the fact that Jeffrey Thorne is not writing it, I think is, I think it's telling. And, Jeffrey Thorne, I mean, frankly, his style of writing just didn't particularly resonate. But you gotta say, man, he definitely put John Stewart through the ringer, and a lot of changes here. I mean,
I wonder, do you think that's why he came up with a second John Stewart in the dark sector? Because the story he wants to tell is John Stewart in the dark sector, right? So yeah, you're going to give PKJ a book. He can write his Green Lantern John Stewart in the regular DCU, and then I can work on the dark sector stories over here, completely separate. John Stewart powerful enough or important enough character in the DCU to have two titles?
That's what I think he did. I think he did. He goes, but I like this character so much, and he has the Dark Sector, John Stewart, go off to try to find his wife, and frankly, that's probably an interesting story. But then there's the other John Stewart, because a lot of people want John Stewart back on Earth, where he's, and PKJ, I think, has taken that. PKJ has a military background. He's probably going to explore John Stewart's military background, make him more down to earth, less godlike. Now we basically have both. So if you like the more godlike, ascended John Stewart in the Dark Sector, you can have stories like that, and you can have the other John Stewart as well. And they talk to each other, and apparently there's no problem. And the way that they conveniently explain hypertime, where hypertime threads itself back into one of the multiverse strings, and it actually makes a crazy kind of sense. But I'd be curious to know some diehard Green Lantern fans how they're going to feel about it. Particularly, I mean, look. Xanshi is now back. That planet is totally restored. John Stewart is basically redeemed. It's been restored. It's now part of our universe now. And that's interesting. And now if he gets his wife back, well then, it's sort of like every wrong ever done to John Stewart is basically being undone now because it was so wrong. So, I mean, hey man, they redeemed Hal Jordan and when he was Parallax and everything else. And now they wanted, this is Jeffrey Thorne. I mean, Jeffrey Thorne, he dropped a lot of hints that he loves John Stewart. And so this really probably shouldn't surprise us, but I am surprised a little.
Yes. Yeah. The idea of him sharing his powers, and God, he's so powerful. He can give up half his power and create these swords and give them out, and he's still one of the more powerful beings in the DCU. I don't know. If I was a John Stewart guy, I probably would just love this. I'm not, so I'm just kind of like, man, it comes across as a little hero worship. But I don't know. Maybe he feels that John Stewart's worthy of it. So anyway, let's move on. Detective Comics number 1067 is up next from writer Ron V. Ivan Reis is the artist on this particular issue. Danny Mickey on inks. Dave Stewart on colors. Ariana Mera does the letters. Bit of a transitional issue. We get Bruce Wayne and Mr. Freeze in sort of an interesting impasse, I guess you'd say. Freeze is like, just leave me alone here in this abandoned power plant. His kingdom of cold, he calls it, where he's got just a bunch of statues of his wife who has been restored but doesn't want anything to do with him. So does he have a meaning or what have you to his life? Seems like not. But Batman is willing to kind of pick his battles, if you will. And then the other part of the story is basically one of these Orgums, part of the Orgum family, going to talk to Bruce and get his take on things. And you don't know if it's coming across as him sort of distracting Bruce from what's going on, because meanwhile, the other members of his family are going to what used to be Wayne Enterprises and are buying up huge chunks of Gotham City and burning them to the ground. Like huge chunks of Gotham City where Wayne Enterprises had created affordable housing. And these people are more along the lines of, I guess, almost like a Ra's al Ghul type theory, right? Or plan where, no, we want to burn everything down so, it can be restored, so it can be replenished or what have you, and, better, bigger and better. And then there's also the backup with Two-Face, which has become harder and harder to read and understand. I know Cy Spurrier can get pretty esoteric at times. I feel I was kind of following along at first, but now I feel completely lost. It's one of the drawbacks to these backups. Rocky and I have talked about it before. You get 8 pages, once a month. It's like, no, just get rid of the backups, cut the book by $1, and let's just be done with it. Because the Hayden Sherman art and the Nick Filardi colors are really fantastic. Steve Wands does the letters, but like, it's such a small part of story, and you're only getting it every month. It's hard to hang on to it, to what's going on. So I'd have to go back and reread it probably all in one sitting once it's out. But honestly, the story's not interesting enough I'm not invested enough in it to go back and spend that time, So it just ends up being superfluous. Um, but there's no doubt that Ivan Reis, as always, is one of the best artists DC has, and the art in the main stories is fantastic. So I do still have some problems with what Ramvy's doing. We've talked about it before, how he's adding in these people that were at the very beginning of Gotham, and it's like not everybody can be there at the very beginning of Gotham, right? Like how much retconning can you do? Now we've got the Court of Owls that's Scott Snyder introduced, and just keep going backwards and backwards and backwards. Then how does everything fit in terms of the timeline? It just gets kind of wonky. So this is okay. The strongest part of it is the line work for me, for sure. What'd you think?
I've been trying to get a handle on this, on the overall narrative, and I'm struggling a bit. I think I got a little bit of a handle on it, but I stand to be corrected. And I encourage everyone who's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, leave comments and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a different interpretation. I'd really like to know. And certainly, Jace, even your perspective, obviously. But as far as I can tell, we had the Detective Comics Annual, which I thought was a chore to read, but it gave the history of the Organs in 18th century Gotham, and for the life of me, I didn't understand what the point of the story was, other than to establish that the Organs used to be in Gotham 300 years ago. And apparently it's revealed in this issue, where there's actually an editor's note that says something that apparently happened in the annual that I didn't pick up happened in the annual at all. But apparently in the annual, there was some sort of thalamus engine that was buried in the bowels of a church in the Detective Comics Annual. I don't recall reading that. I'm sure it did, but that whole annual was, I think, not particularly well written. But in this issue, what I find what's really odd here is that they talk about a reality engine and then a thalamus engine that this master master Orgam, and he's got this Gowl working for him as the bodyguard. They retrieve this thalamus engine from the bowels of the church underneath which it was buried, which is the same church that they want to build their own Arkham building, or their own Orgham building, to replace on the previous site of Arkham Asylum. And apparently that this thalamus engine can now help them begin the true work of reshaping the city and reminding it of its underlying scars and mapping them to this reality engine. And then when he's saying this reality engine, his Gowl is opening up this chest, and inside the chest are 4 masks. And this is where Ram V really uses a bunch of synonyms for mask. He says, what fool poet thought the vizard and aegis? Vizard means mask, aegis means protection. So what fool thought that these masks could be protection? Basically, none of these masks are meant to protect. These masks are meant to be weapons. I note that the only mask I recognize is the Court of Owl mask, the owl mask. So if we have the Court of Owls at the beginning of Gotham, what do the other 3 masks represent? Do we have other courts other than the Court of Owls? I'm confused, but intrigued a little bit. So we got the Court of Owls mask and these other 3 masks, but then we also have something called the Azir that Mr. Freeze gives to Batman after rescuing Batman. Mr. Freeze doesn't want to help the Orgams, and so he gives Batman this Azir power source of some time at the beginning of the issue, saying that this is what they want, but I don't want to help them out. And Mr. Freeze says something to Batman that's very interesting. He says, I think that you think of Gotham like I think of Nora. And Mr. Freeze says to him that, Nora recently left me, because Nora became, remember, he cured Nora. Nora became thawed out, and then Nora basically betrayed Mr. Freeze, and now she's out on her own doing her own villainy. She left him. And incidentally, this is not the Nora of the One Bad Day, so there's a continuity glitch there, but in any event, Mr. Freeze compares, just like he had an idealistic view of Nora, Mr. Freeze says to Batman, I think that Gotham is your Nora. You have an idealistic view of Gotham, and just like I had an idealistic view of Nora, and you're wrong. And that's one of the things that Ram V is trying to make. One of the points he's trying to make through the Orgams is that we as readers only think we know what Gotham is. The Orgams are saying they have this press conference, ushering a new age, buying up all of Gotham properties. Gotham only thinks it knows itself. The true history of Gotham is what the Orgams know through this Azir, through these masks. And these masks aren't to protect us. We're going to use these masks as weapons. And so I don't really know where the hell all this is going and how it involved the League of Assassins and Talia at the beginning, but it's kind of intriguing. I just wish it wasn't so convoluted because it doesn't seem paced very well in my mind. And I share your sentiment with respect to the backup feature. Man, get rid of that backup feature. It's not really helping at all. I don't really understand the backup. I don't understand the backup feature has Gal talking to Two-Face. And I just don't understand and then he refers to a Dr. Mead. I don't know who that is. He says the Asmir is curiously silent. I don't know that the Asmir, was it supposed to make some noise? I don't understand the references here. And when I read this comic 2 or 3 times, I'm still lost. So I literally I'll have to listen to other reviews and read other reviews and to try to figure out what's going on. But I don't think Ram V is doing a particularly good job with clarifying this story because it seems like he has a habit sometimes of being very esoteric and being very flowery and a little bit pretentious in his language, and then dropping a bunch of revelations at the end. But the journey all the time, sometimes the journey can be a little wonky in that respect. But in any event, are you picking, is this narrative clear to you or?
No, no, not at all. But again, like you said, I sort of expect that from Ram V, and maybe it'll come together in the end. Like if it's sort of a drawback of the way we do this, right? Like we do these DC spotlights, and we got to look at how many books we're talking about here. We're going on like 3 hours here, so it's a lot to digest. So if you're reading everything, I can't maybe take the time to spend as much as I would like to with Ram V. And this is week after week after week, right, that we do this. So yeah, I was like, in order to understand this and get more out of it, I probably need to go, and maybe this isn't fair to the writers that we do it this way, but I would need to be going back and constantly, like every 2 or 3 issues, going back and rereading the run from the beginning, right? Or if I was more heavily invested, this is the only comic I bought, maybe I could remember it better or have it make more sense. But so I'm not going to lay all the blame at Ram V's feet, but yeah, I go back and think about his Swamp Thing run. It was kind of the same thing. There's a lot of cool ideas there, but it's not the easiest read, as opposed to something like what Bruce Campbell is doing, for example, in Sergeant Rock. I can follow that. I can remember, like, no problem, because there's not all these big ideas, and it's not to say that one story is better than the other. It's just a different style of a different way to tell a story, as it were. So. All right. Up next, The Riddler Year One, Part 2 from writer Paul Dano. Stephen Subic is the artist. Clayton Cowell on letters. For those that aren't familiar, Paul Dano's the actor who played the Riddler in the latest Batman, the Matt Reeves Batman movie, and this is that version of the Riddler. So don't pick this up thinking you're going to get like Tom King, Mitch Gerard's Riddler. This is something completely different. So, what did you think? Are you enjoying this?
I just honestly, I wasn't a fan of the Batman movie. I didn't enjoy the Batman movie, and because it's the same tone and the same mindset as the Batman movie, I've not been enjoying it. No, but in fairness, it seems to be written. It seems to have a point. I just sort of skim read it. I can't give an objective review of it. I skim read it, and so I really don't have much to say on it. If you're a fan of the Batman movie, and look, the Batman movie is on the top 10 list. is on the top 10 list of a lot of people's best movies of 2022, and by all means, pick up this series by Paul Dano, because it's right up the alley. When I skim read it, it felt like it was just rehearsing a lot of the same plot points I remember from the movie. But so I can't really give a fair and appropriate review of it. So I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw the movie, so I don't really have any perspective in terms of that. But what I will say is, like I said, this isn't a version of the Riddler that I'm familiar with at all. This is the version of the Riddler from that movie and his origin. And I will say that Paul Dano uh, he's done a good job of making the character sympathetic. Like, we haven't gotten to the point where he's like blowing things up or killing people or whatever. I mean, I don't know what he does in the movie, but it starts off with Edward Nigma, and he's not a bad guy. He has, good intentions, and he's sort of being, I don't want to say persecuted, but maybe taken advantage of by those around him, and lied to and manipulated. And that's, he's got some mental stuff going on already, some mental challenges, and probably some social challenges as well. So that's all adding up to probably create the serial killer or supervillain or villain or whatever you want to call it that the Riddler is in the movie. So yeah, I think if you enjoy that movie, you owe it to yourself to pick this up, because it's probably very additive to the character of the Riddler in that film. So like I said, I haven't seen it. Don't have any plans to see it anytime soon. Just didn't seem to be my particular cup of tea, or particular brand of vodka, if you prefer that phrase. Um, so I didn't see it. I have no plans to see it, despite people saying it's really, really good. So that does it for the issues we're going to cover. Like I said, Young Justice Targets #6 is also out today. I think there was one other. Oh, Batman: The Audio Adventures #4 is also out. And then in terms of collections, we've got the Rorschach trade paperback dropping on the 27th. Superman Red and Blue trade paperback, and that's that anthology with a limited color palette. It's also out. There's also, speaking of the Court of Owls, a new printing of Batman Volume 1, The Court of Owls trade paperback. You can get just a trade paperback, or you can buy the set that comes with the Court of Owls mask. And then the DC poster portfolio, Brian Boland. So if you're a big Brian Boland fan, you can look forward to that. So I want to thank all the guests on the 12 Days of the Comic Source for coming on this year. It was some great, great conversations. If you didn't get a chance to listen to them and you're off work or out of school this week, I highly encourage you to go listen. There's a lot of great information, a lot of passionate creators, a lot of fun. I couldn't pick a favorite, man. I mean, from Jeremy Adams to Tom Taylor to Tom King, Stephanie Phillips, Christopher Cantwell chat was amazing. The talk I had with Jatson Langston and Colin Kelly was amazing. Like they all were just so much fun, so informative.
And thank you for doing that, because it actually gave me something to do every morning when I was getting ready, and it was enjoyable to listening to the interviews. It's very informative, and it's nice to hear these people talk about, all these writers talk so passionately about what they do, and because regardless of how you feel about the work that they do, and I mean it's hard not to be. It's hard not to appreciate the passion that they bring to their projects.
Yeah, it's the same way I feel about Brian Michael Bendis, right? Like, he's been on my show. I don't particularly enjoy the work that he did on Superman, but you cannot go to a panel that guy is on or hosting, or meet him at a con and talk about comics with him, and not, like, his love of comics is infectious. You cannot help but smile and feel good talking about comics with him, regardless of whether you like the story or the plot lines or whatever. So, and a lot of these creators, I know them personally, so we touch on some other stuff, holidays and traditions and that. Get to know them a little bit, because I know a lot of these people. I mean, when I was a kid, I would have been over the moon to talk to some of these writers that were writing the stories that I love to read as kids, and I have gotten to talk to some of them, like Jerry Conway and Marv Wolfman and those guys. So anyway, hope you guys all enjoyed it. Anything you want to tease, Rocky, you have coming up? I have more interviews coming up this month. I mean, I really would love to, drop a new interview on you like every day of the year, but it's not feasible with the day job. But there were a lot of people that reached out that I reached out to that couldn't make it before Christmas and want to do it in the new year. So we'll have more coming, but nothing concrete yet. But anyway, what do you have coming up on Comic Boom?
Probably in the next few days, I'll probably do and some indie reviews. But I want to do my top 10 favorite DC comics for the year. And my top indie. I'm not going to do top Marvel because I read very few Marvel this year. I've kind of gone away from Marvel. But my top indie and my top DC comic is something that I definitely that'll be coming out for sure. So
yeah, we hope to do the best of the Comic Source 2022. Hopefully, it'll be before February. I really this last weekend wanted to start working on my list, but of course I didn't. But,
all right, pick of the week. What's your pick of the week?
Pick of the week. You know, it's tough because there's some really great books. Batman Beyond the White Knight was fantastic. Obviously, Wonder Woman Historia with that Nicholas Scott art was gorgeous. But and the ending of Nice House on the Lake was also fantastic. But I gotta go because he's my favorite character and my favorite issue of the era. Super powered, jacked up, hyper space doesn't mean anything. Space time doesn't mean anything. He's as powerful as he's ever been. I got to go with Action Comics 1050 as my pick of the week. Specifically for that reason. Superman's identity being restored, great. Seeing Manchester Black get screwed up, great. Seeing Lex Luthor be, an evil, manipulative bastard that he always is, great. But the cherry on top is Superman more powerful than ever.
Yeah, that's a really good issue, Action Comics. But I have to go. I have to go with Nice House on the Lake because it's so rare to have a. It's one thing to have a fantastic journey when you read a story, but when the destination is even more epic than the journey, and the journey was fantastic. This was the journey of reading, the joy of reading Nice House on the Lake every week. There wasn't a single issue we didn't like. The suspense built and built and built, and James Tynion, he nailed the landing here. Absolutely nailed the landing. So kudos to him.
Yeah, exactly. And this wasn't one of those things where we got this ambiguous ending. Yes, there are more cells. We could possibly get more stories. But yeah, I agree with you, what you said earlier. Like, I hope we don't go back to these particular characters. Like, I feel like their story is almost circular in a way, and it's complete, and like, don't mess with it. So anyway, that's going to do it, everybody. Appreciate you joining us as always. Don't forget to head over to YouTube. If you don't subscribe to Rocky's channel already, please do so. Comic Space Boom ! Like this, ring the notification bell, leave comments. You guys know what to do. Conversely, if you found us on YouTube and you want to be sure not to miss any of the audio-only Comic Source podcast content, just go to wherever you get your podcast from, do a search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. So we appreciate you all joining us as always. Wishing everybody a happy new year. Hope you had a festive Christmas, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.